Good evening. I'm going to call the Personnel and Administrative Affairs Committee to order. Today is Tuesday, November 1st, 2022, and it's 7 p.m. We are in the Aldermanic Chamber. Can the clerk please call the roll?
Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly, Chairwoman.
I'm here.
Alderman at Large Ben Clemens, Vice Chair.
Here.
Alderman Tyler Govia.
I am here.
Alderman Thomas Lopez.
I too am here.
Alderman Derek Tebow is here. We also have the Mayor, Jim Donchis, joining us with Alderman Camo, Alderman Klee, and Alderman Sullivan in attendance, and Alderman Dowd. We have Director Cummings as well in the audience.
Thank you. We also have Mayor Jim Donchis, Director Cummings. Is there anybody else? I can't say. Yeah, you said great. Well, let's be redundant tonight. Okay. Is there anybody from the public who would like to make public comment this evening? Please come up and state your name and address for the record.
For the shorties, I'll stand on my toes.
You can turn it down. Yep, there you go. Okay. Did it come down enough for you?
We're good.
You can also take it right off.
I think we're good. I'll speak up.
Alex is going to help you.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Amy DeRoche. I am the Economic Development Coordinator and the Hunt Memorial Building Administrator. Director Cummings will tell you that I am not a fan of being out in the public eye, as it were, but I felt it was important to come out this evening and lend him my support. I have worked with Director Cummings for 6 years. It is my hope that that continues, possibly by moving the Hunt Memorial Building over to administrative services. It's also important that I point out that I said that I work with him. He's always made it very clear that I do not work for him, that I work with him. And it's that kind of distinction that has created the team that we've become over the years. He has always encouraged me to better myself and to take on new projects and roles. And he told me many years ago that he would never let me fail. And that's something that's definitely stayed with me. He is someone who cares deeply about making sure that everyone who works with him is happy and successful in what they do. It does sadden me that he has to move towards a new role, but I know everyone who will be working with him in admin services will be lucky to have him on their side. He's one of the hardest working people I think I have ever met, and his drive is to always move Nashua forward and to make it a better place. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public like to give comment? Thank you. Tip it up a little bit. Don't break it.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Jill Stansfield, Parking Manager for the City of Nashua. I've worked for the city for over 12 years. And I'm here tonight to speak in support of Director Cummings, who's up for appointment to the Administrative Services Director position. I have worked under Director Cummings for the last 6 years and wanted to come forward to support him as he embarks on this new journey for the city. He came to the city at a time when new leadership and vision was needed, and he has been able to provide that. When I started with the city shortly after the 2008-2009 recession, the downtown was somewhat bleak, quiet, and uninviting in some instances. There were many vacant storefronts along Main Street. During the last decade, and more specifically the last 6 years, I've seen a big change in the downtown, and that is in large part due to the hard work of Director Cummings. While he and I have not agreed on everything, we do strongly agree on one thing, and that is that we both want Nashua to be set up for success for decades to come. Tim cares about people, he supports and empowers his staff, and ultimately has the best interest of the city in mind. We share the same passion and dedication when it comes to cutting costs, streamlining processes, creating efficiencies, and most importantly, leading a successful team. The support and guidance from Director Cummings over the years has been invaluable and has made me a better leader for my own team. I thank him for recognizing my achievements and encouraging me to accomplish more. I know he will provide the same support and guidance to all of those who work within the Administrative Services Division as well. And on that note, I feel that parking could also be a good fit under administrative services. Our office already works very closely with the departments. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to make public comment? Okay. Next, we have communications.
There is none.
So I believe we were sent by email a communication that was asked to be accepted and placed on file. That is correct, right? That is in front of us. So do you have a motion for it? Thank you.
I do. I would like to accept the two communications, one in regards to ordinance 22-031 and the other in regards to ordinance 22-030, which have been placed on our desks this evening. I'd like to move to place them on file.
Thank you, Alderman Clemmons. Is there any discussion on that motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right, moving on to interviews.
Director of Administrative Services, Timothy Cummings, term to expire indefinitely, serving at the pleasure of the mayor.
Mr. Mayor, would you like to introduce your recommendation for Administrative Services Director?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. So I'm here to recommend to you the nomination or the approval of Tim Cummings as Administrative Services Director. I nominated him a month or so ago and asked him to serve in the Administrative Services Director in an interim or acting capacity. But over the years that he's been with the city, the last 6 years, I've gotten to know Tim very well and have worked very closely with him as in his role as Economic Development Director. He's accomplished a lot for the city, downtown, job growth. He has managed numerous construction projects in addition to economic development. The building for Public Works, the building for the Health Department, the Performing Arts Center. He has accomplished a great deal for the city of Nashua, and as you've already heard, he works very well with people. His staff loves working for him. He develops a team approach and a common bond with the people with whom he works, which I believe is a very important characteristic for the Administrative Services Director, who is responsible for working with IT, with assessing, with human resources, personnel, assessing and purchasing, and a broad variety of people within the city. Now, in terms of Tim's background, before coming to Nashua, he has experience in city management. He worked in several different city managing positions down in Massachusetts, in the town manager's office of Burlington, of Lexington, and in Foxborough. In addition, he has a he has a master's degree from Northeastern in public administration, which was a 2-year, full-time program, which he attended after college. He went to Suffolk University. And in addition to the good qualities that I've already mentioned, he is always interested in self-improvement. He took a course online from Notre Dame, obviously in South Bend, in city management. And now, because he's involved in these construction projects, he's been taking from Columbia University in New York City an online course in construction management. And I think he will apply that type of approach to this new position in making sure he's educated regarding the various areas of expertise that the people who work for him have. So I will be sad to lose him as Administrative Services Director because he has done so well in that job, and I believe we will have trouble replacing him. Excuse me. I will be sad to lose him in the position of Economic Development Director because he has done such a good job there, and I think he's really helped to move the city forward in many respects. But this job will enable him to use all of his skills with a larger group of people internal to city government, and I believe that in the end we will find a economic development director with whom we can work together, all of us, to advance the economic prospects and future, which I believe to be bright, of the city of Nashua. So with that, I will ask Tim to say a few things about himself and about his interest in the position of Administrative Services Director, and of course, he will be able to respond to any questions or comments that you have.
Thank you. Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the committee, and thank you, Mayor, for the kind words. Tim Cummings, Director of Economic Development, Interim Administrative Services Director. So just very briefly, my vision for my role as the Director of Administrative Services is one to be supporting the subject matter experts within the various departments. I would be looking to empower those various departments, and I'll be looking to help provide strategic organizational type of support. I would hope to work with the other departments as well that aren't necessarily part of general government in providing a customer service type of supportive role. Ultimately, that's what I look at administrative services as being, is good customer service and providing that centralized administrative support for the general government here in the city of Nashua. I think most of you all know me with my through economic development, but my background is very much in local government. I have worked in centralized administrative type offices throughout my career, and I have always saw myself going in this type of trajectory with my career, and my goal is to ultimately continue along the path. So when this opportunity arose, it's definitely something that I saw myself wanting to pursue, because I very much enjoy working in Nashua and wanted a different challenge that still complemented my skill sets. So I'll leave my comments there, Madam Chair, but I am very much looking forward to this new opportunity.
Thank you, Director Cummings. I'd like to open it up to conversation from the immediate personnel committee members, and then also we'll take comments from any of the aldermen who are attending. Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So I was going to give you a softball, but you kind of already answered it. So I'll start right with the more difficult question. I look at economic development. I think that's fun. So to go into something that I think would be more difficult in a way, and maybe more not as fun, I guess, in my opinion anyway, was surprising, but you kind of answered why you wanted to go that way. So I'm going to address the elephant in the room. So you've been criticized, maybe terrorized a lot for your job from citizens. Not so much from the people in this chamber. I think you have done a great job as economic development director. But a lot of it's, Tim's not approachable, as a person from outside this chamber, right? Can't get to talk to him. In this role, you might have to be more available than maybe you had to be as economic development to the public. How do you see that? How do you see that in this role? Like, how are you going to approach it different than maybe you would as an economic development director?
Well, I guess, if I may, Madam Chair.
Director Cummings.
Thank you. I guess I would start by saying, well, I guess I reject the premise of the suggestion that I'm not available. So yes, there's criticisms of me from members of the public, but I would suggest that If it was an actually true representation, it would be coming from more than just one or two or a handful of people. You all would be hearing from it loudly from the public. And I would suggest that that's not the case. So, I do believe I'm accessible. I do believe I am always striving to be as transparent as possible, and I value that. That's a value that I hold very dear. If you look at my resume, it will show you that I've worked in government my entire career. I didn't get into this business to work in the cover of darkness. I very much want to provide a service to the public, and it's anyone who works in public service, either as a volunteer or professionally, they do it because they have a certain set of values, and being accessible, being transparent, and trying to provide a service to the public as best they can with the limited resources that they have, is just a typical value of someone who actually works professionally in the industry.
Follow.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just one more question. I'll give you something a little more fun to answer. So looking at the department now, administrative services, you've been doing it interimly for a little bit now. What do you see as something that's an opportunity that you can go in and hit the ground running and try to actually make better, that maybe needs to be better?
Sure, great question, if I may, Madam Chair.
Director Cummings.
So first and foremost, I have a vision of what I would like to see the Administrative Services Office do, and I very much see that with the values being creating stronger centralized administrative support. But how do we do that? As I said, customer service being paramount, but also developing a better working relationship or a more collaborative working relationship with the other departments, I think is really critical. So there's that open line of communication, because we have such a decentralized form of government here. We are going to need to have that spirit of cooperation to be able to achieve some of these more bureaucratic or administratively mundane type of tasks, but are really important if you want to create an efficient government. So with that being said, at first I want to do no harm, and I want to sit back, listen, absorb, take everything in, really watch and monitor how everything unfolds over the next few months. And then what I would like to do, and one of the visions I have for this role, is to play more of a strategic, organizational type of leadership. I won't be necessarily in the weeds of the various departments, but trying to provide that long-term strategic type of management that I think is really important for the city of Nashua. And I'll give you an example, since you asked. I've thought about recently, is there someone thinking about some of the needs that the city of Nashua has in terms of facilities and asset management, but really when it also comes down to is when other additional services get put upon the city, and I'll use the example of the city clerk's office, and when all of a sudden now you have early voting, which is like a new thing that's come about over the last couple of years, is there someone stepping back and thinking about, well, how is early voting actually affecting the operations of city government? And from a facilities perspective, you have to create a whole new way that you actually operate. And does our current setup actually work the functions that we now expect our clerk's office to provide? I would suggest to you it doesn't. You have lines going out the door, it blocks other doors, it creates a nuisance. That's a very much a detailed example for you of how I would like to potentially look at fixing a problem that I think we have a responsibility to address. The other one is just who's thinking about the space and our space needs as a centralized form of government over the coming years, and making sure we have a plan in place. I've heard comments around this horseshoe over the last few years that I absolutely agree with. our capital improvement plan may need a little work. And I agree with that. And we need someone actually thinking about some of these things so it gets put into the plan, and so you all know and can act appropriately.
Thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
So first, I just want to comment to the mayor, I guess. There wasn't really an open call for this. There weren't other competing bids put in. So it's a little awkward to be in the situation where we have a effective economic development director who's interviewing for another job. So for me, that's the elephant in the room is, I mean, do we thumbs up and send him to another role that we're maybe not sure of? Or do we say no and now we're stuck with an economic development director who's like, thank you for that, and is still an employee? So that's awkward. I think a lot of seasoned and experienced politicians would probably be very delicate about this, and yet I am myself. So I do not think I would be doing Director Cummings any favors by softballing this, because I think we're likely to hear from certain parties over the next couple of years that this was speed passed or ushered through the doors, or he was given special treatment. So I intend to be as fair as possible in interviewing this without quite straying over to like Michael Scott interviewing Toby on his way out. So Director Cummings, you know I haven't always agreed with your economic policies. I've been fairly vocal about my disagreement with the overnight parking strategies at place and those types of things. And I think we still have a lot of work to do with the Mohawk Tannery, but I think communication could have been more effective, and maybe a little bit more transparency in terms of engaging the different stakeholders and putting residents as primary stakeholders. I also recognize, however, that as Economic Development Director, there are some advantages to making sure that people are approaching the city with reasonably sound plans, that they have a reasonable understanding of what could be done. And so I appreciate that while we have not always been on the same page in terms of our priorities, because I am an elected official who is elected to represent local individuals and you are a strategic planner, I have to admit that I think there is some opportunity here, particularly looking at your resume. I recall being on the committee that approved you initially as Economic Development Director, and I did not take note of a lot of the other governmental roles that you had, working for a senator's office, working on a number of special projects. And I do take note of the fact that I think this is probably the first time we've had a inside staff member being proposed or nominated for an upwards move where all of the people he worked with not only approve him and support him, but want to transfer their departments to his. I don't recall that ever happening. So those definitely speak to your favor. My question is, with regards to your past, how would you disentangle yourself from your identity as Economic Development Director and the priorities contained therein and transition to the new priorities that you described, especially in the context that we don't have another Economic Development Director?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Director Cummings.
Thank you. So there was a lot there. So let me start by saying, and I think this is great that you point this out, my identity. I don't identify myself as an economic development professional. I actually identify myself more as a local government manager professional. I happen to use economic development as the foot in the door, if you will, for me to be able to have my career. You have to start somewhere, and you don't just start at a junior level working as a town manager or a director of administrative services, but you work your way up to that type of role. But I always knew and had a vision that I was going to work in local government at a senior level. And so I actually think of myself more as a local government professional more than an economic development professional. I just happen to practice economic development at the local level.
Alderman Lopez, did you have follow-ups or
Madam Chair, could I
clarification?
supplement that answer a little bit?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you. So one advantage and one reason that I appointed Mr. Cummings is that he knows all of the players. And they're very familiar with him and they like him and they can work well with him. And I'm talking about the other division directors and the the employees of the city. A risk that you take when you hire someone from the outside is, what if that person doesn't get along with these people? What if they don't like this person? What if it doesn't work out? And you've got to wait months to figure out who this person even is. And I thought we needed leadership right away. If we look to the history of this position, and you'll remember that it was reinstituted several years ago after being eliminated for a period of 4 or 5 years, 5 or 6 years, but it had been in place for decades before that. And the successful administrative services directors that we remember were people like Mr. Cummings, who knew knew people within the city, had worked within the city, and were familiar with Nashua. The first being Russ Marcoux, who had been on the Board of Aldermen, was an employee of Purity Supreme. I'm sure Ben will remember Russ, and was hired by Morris Arell as the first administrative services director, and he served for 10 years very successfully. Later on, the next one that did served a significant tenure and did a good job was Maureen Lemieux. She had been on the Board of Aldermen, worked for Bernie Streeter in his office, kind of like the staff, the direct chief of staff, worked very extensively on the budget, and she was then appointed and confirmed in the position of administrative services director. She was familiar with everyone. She knew the city. She knew the budgeting. She did very well and served here effectively for a number of years until she went on to work for the city of Newton, where she's still working, I believe, as the city finance director. Russ went on to manage various cities or towns, Bedford, New Hampshire. I think he did Derry for a while down in Rhode Island. He did pass away early as a result of a food poisoning situation, but when that was unfortunate. But those were the two that you really remember and who were long-term effective in this job. And both of them were people who came from Nashua, had worked within the city, understood the city, and knew all of the relevant people. And that is, I believe, one of the biggest reasons that Tim Cummings is the appropriate person for this job.
Alderman Lopez, follow up?
Just in response to the mayor first, I am conscious when we look at records that you are one of the best mayors that the city has had in recent history twice, and you didn't do it on easy mode. You went through the pandemic, and we're still getting #1 in multiple rankings. We're still seeing huge increases in property values and economic activity where many, many other cities are dying. So I accept that you seem like you know what you're doing and you're pretty good at picking out characteristics and attributes for people. And I think it's important for you to comment on that because it does kind of look like you're not looking for other candidates, but you do recognize that there's value in not losing step in the middle of busy city activities in a period where maybe we are struggling with full staffing in terms of making sure we have everybody that we want at the table. And then we are trying to weather oncoming and evidently ongoing economic storms. To Director Cummings, where you described the Economic Development Director as a foot in the door, that is a heck of a foot in the door. That is, your success can't be denied because I've tried. I'd love to point it at someone else, but for some reason, just keep coming up. You've done a great job. I have fought you every step of the way when we've disagreed, and I have to acknowledge that often your strategies are successful, and we benefit greatly from as a city for it. To infer that you were maybe giving that role 80 or 90% of your passion, not to be confused with your professionalism, your diligence, your dedication, but if you wanted this more than that, and economic development success we've had for the past 6 years has been just a precursor to this role, then I think it's very encouraging, and I will support your nomination moving forward for that. I have just one last question. As effective as you were in economic development and as ambitious as you are about administrative services, you have big shoes to fill. You have to come in the footsteps of Director Kleiner. And we do have a number of morale issues, of staffing issues, logistical issues. As you mentioned, the early voting. The building is a little bit older, and every time we try to renovate it and fix things, we may cause new problems by addressing the existing ones. That specific issue that you brought up with the city clerk, it kind of strikes me that we just redesigned the city clerk's office to where it's essentially 2 doors and a foyer and not very much room. So of course people are lining up and going out. So with all of that in mind, how do you plan to put your mark on this? What do you plan to focus on in just the immediate 6 months, should you be approved by the Board of Aldermen?
Sure, if I may, Madam Chair. So again, the first few months, I wouldn't suggest that I'm going to do a whole lot of rocking the boat because I'm going to be getting a lay of the land. But I would like to believe I'll be coming back before you in 6 months or so, in 9 months, in a good, in a period of time from now, in a good period of time from now, with some plans and to have conversations with you. It's your city, and I take, my lead from the mayor and this body here in terms of you are the policy makers. I will provide you with some options. I will point out what I believe to be potential deficits. I will encourage where we have strengths, and I will promote where we have those strengths. But ultimately, I will be taking more of an organizational, strategic approach to develop long-term plans. To give you a very specific example, I would like to play a more active role in the capital improvement plan. I think that is an area that I can already see on the outside where we definitely need to maybe put a little bit more attention and focus on that for the betterment of the community. I believe there's other areas. You talked about morale, and I very much understand that could be an issue or a concern, and I'd like to kind of understand that better and come back with some strategies. I think Director Kleiner, to your point, a very good director, started to see that and started to put some strategies in place. I'll be looking to continue those with the employee empowerment plan that she had developed.
I swear this is my last question, but just for clarification, I really appreciate hearing that last part because I think the city of Nashua, with all of its success, should be something where staff members feel proud and entitled to share in that success rather than maybe feeling separated from it, or that all that recognition is for other people and not them when they're doing the work. So I think it's really important that we address the morale issues. But how quickly do you see an economic development director being identified or recruited?
Thank you. So we've already advertised for the position. I believe it will be a very high priority, selfishly for me, that we get an economic development director in as quickly as possible. I am not aware of anyone submitting yet, but it's still open. And so I fully anticipate us closing that, having interviews, and I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I think it would be our top priority after the first of the year.
When we had the same discussion when I appointed Kim Kleiner as Administrative Services Director, we did not advertise outside. We created, I proposed to you, and then you adopted the idea of reinstituting this position. And the reason I believe that she succeeded was that she also, like these two out of history that served quite long term, she knew everyone. She knew she was familiar with the city and was able to adjust quickly to the environment. And so I think if we look to the successful cases in the past, they're all similar to Mr. Cummings moving into this new position.
All set, Alderman Lopez?
Yep, thank you.
All right, before we move on, I want to interject here quickly. You've mentioned early voting, and you mentioned early voting. Just to clarify, because the election is in 1 week, I believe what you were referring to is absentee voting, and that there's been an influx of absentee voting because we don't have.
Oh, we're not calling it
Early
illegal
voting.
voting
I
anymore?
apologize, absentee voting.
There's more of that, people showing up to vote in person than on an absentee basis than we've had in the past.
I just didn't want the line to get any bigger.
Yes.
Wanted to clarify. Okay, I saw Alderman Govea and then Alderman Tebow. Alderman Clemmons, did you have your hand up?
No, I don't.
Okay. Alderman Govea?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. This is honestly tough for me. I am torn on the nomination. I see you're interested in the job, and I think that's great. It's an important job in the city, but at the same time, leaving the Economic Development Department is tough. And is that what's best for the city? And that, to me, I don't know. Yes, we can move you over to this new role. And to the mayor's point, you know, you could bring somebody in who clashes and it's just not a good fit and a good culture, then you go back to square one. Well, in the economic development role, that's tying up tens of millions of dollars of projects. That could stall a lot of what's going on in the city. It's a very, I go back and forth, and I've been thinking about this the last few days of which way I want to go on the nomination, solely because I think you've done a great job with downtown Nashua, and this isn't to discredit you as a person, but is this what's better for both departments? Sure, yes, if we move you over to the new role, it will take a small step back, obviously, as it would when anybody new comes in. But will it take a larger step back in economic development when we bring somebody new in? It's so hard to tell. So I think a question I do have would be just what is your background with administrative services, their functions? So obviously assessing benefits, GIS, HR, information technology, payroll, purchasing, risk management. It's very diverse. So what would your background be in that?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank
Dr.
you,
Cummings.
Madam Chair. Thank you. So let me start by saying, ideally, if I am appointed to be the Administrative Services Director, I still will be here in the city, and I would like to think I could help support the Economic Development Director. So I wouldn't like to think that there would be as much of a loss of momentum, because a lot of these projects are near and dear to me as well. But putting that aside, to answer your very specific question about my background, something that you may or may not know, I'm a certified public procurement official, right? So I am fully understand how public procurement should work. I'm well vested in that. But again, to be clear, I don't want to be the subject matter expert. We have a purchasing manager in the city, but I am very knowledgeable about that. Prior to working here in the city of Nashua, I ran a private nonprofit. That private nonprofit, I ran all the centralized administrative functions as the executive director. I put together an employee handbook and got that adopted by that board, handling all the human resources functions for that nonprofit. Very, very knowledgeable about GIS. As an urban planner by trade, I understand how GIS works, and was brought in very early on when the thought process was that we were going to have GIS become a standalone department and spin out of assessing. So because of my background in local government, I have worked for so many years in central administrative type of functions. I've negotiated collective bargaining agreements. That's not typical of an economic development director, but because I worked in the town of Foxborough, I worked very closely with former Nashua chief, when he was the chief in Foxborough, to negotiate the firefighters' contracts for the town of Foxborough. So I have the skills. This is honestly me just continuing to use the skills that I have for the city of Nashua for the better.
Thank you.
I know I saw Alderman Clee, Alderman Tebow, and I just saw Alderman Sullivan. I'm just gonna finish up the committee members.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So you would say this is a big job, correct?
Yes.
So in companies that hire people for big jobs, 6 or 7 questions one time probably isn't how they hire, right? And I don't want to make it sound like, because you've done a good job for us, that we should go rubber stamping anything. And I apologize for everybody that's here waiting for their turn, but I think it's vitally important that on a job we're basically giving a job that's a good job, right? And I think we do our due diligence. I've led customer service organizations for 25 years, so I've interviewed, hundreds, maybe thousands of people over those years, and it never goes, you hire a customer service agent and they get more questions than this. So I just want to be very clear that that's why I'm asking questions, because I think, we need to get out as much as we can to make our decision. So, Alderman Lopez mentioned morale, and one department that would be under you that's had some issues with morale and just some basic issues in the past, lots of right-to-knows coming their way, is the assessing department. So how would you assess the assessing department currently? Like, what are your thoughts on it? How do you think that it's going to go forward? And just get your general thoughts on it, and any maybe help with the morale there. And I know you talked about this program that Kim had started, or Director Kleiner had started, but what things can you do personally with that department right now to help them with morale? Because we've lost a lot of people out of assessment. That's been kind of a deep hole, and I just kind of want to know what your thoughts are.
Sure.
Director Cummings?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think that the assessing department, rightfully so, morale should be low with everything that they've undertaken over the last few years, but the fortitude that those individuals have to show up every day and do the best that they can is remarkable. And what I recognize is I see that, and we are all human. We make mistakes. It's not necessarily that I would want someone to be perfect. What I want is someone to have the values that when they make a mistake, that they can say, I've made a mistake, I'm doing the best I can, and I will do better as I move forward. And I see that. I see that in not just the assessing department. I see that in all of our departments. That we're all doing the best we can in very stressful situations with very limited resources sometimes, and we need to manage that. And that's what I like to believe I can do. I can tell you, I am not a big proponent of hiring people. I often will say I don't want to be known as someone who brings in more employees, but I can tell you right now our assessing department is understaffed, and one of the things I would be recommending sometime in the future is to address that. We need more capacity in the assessing department, and I think it will be very difficult to do that for two reasons. One, obviously, some of the criticism that's out there will make it difficult to bring someone in. And two, the profession itself is one where it's very hard to find assessors or appraisers in the industry. It is very difficult. I work very closely with appraisers all the time through economic development. If you understand what economic development is at the very central basic level, at the local government level, it is property values and how you increase property values. So I speak to appraisers all the time, and they're telling me it's 6, 8, 12 weeks, sometimes longer, 16 weeks to get an appraisal report done. And it's because they're so busy and there's not enough appraisers. Anyway, I bring this full circle because one of the strategies I actually think I would be looking to bring forward is to contract service provide, and to get a professional contract service provider for that additional capacity, but they're professionals and expert in the field to come in and not have it be in lieu of the assessing department, but in addition to. So we can have that, that available capacity and that professional expertise there to help with some of these more nuanced issues that may arise. I think that would only help the community as a whole, and it's something that I would want to dig a little bit further into.
Thank you.
All set, Alderman Tebow?
I am, thank you.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. First off, I don't think we've ever rubber stamped a position from the mayor's recommendation and so on. And I think we hear that all the time. And I don't think this is rubber stamp. Looking at your resume, I think it's quite amazing and quite interesting, and I think you would be good for the job. I don't get to vote here, but I will vote with the full board. One of the things, I worked my way up through the federal government, starting with a clerk in the, for lack of a better word, they called it the library, but it was the Library of Laws, is where I worked, and I worked my way up very hard, as I can see that you've done the same thing. You've gone from one area of local government to another, and you keep doing that. Do you believe that a director of anything, whether it be the mayor or a director of a department, needs to know every little aspect of the position? In other words, do you need to know everything about assessing, everything about HR, et cetera?
Director Cummings?
No, I don't, Alderman Clee.
So, may I continue? So having said that, I absolutely agree with you. I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense. When I worked at Westover Air Force Base, I can tell you that General Billy did not know every single aspect of that. When I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs, the 3 directors I worked under there probably wouldn't know anything about finance, which is one of the areas that I had worked in, or the computer area. One of them was the chief of pharmacy. And someone could say, well, what is the chief of pharmacy going to know about all of these other things? He was a good director. He knew how to administer people. And I want to bring that up because one of the things you said was you were going to continue with implementing some personnel type of issues. And Alderman Lopez had already asked about the changes you wanted him to do over the next 6 months, and I really do appreciate that. And I think it's been brought up too. I want to know how you're going to curtail people's anxieties, whether they know you or not. One of the things everybody had, I had it every time we got a new boss, the fear that employees have of, oh my goodness, they're going to make so many changes, is my job safe? How are you going to reassure them that that is not going to happen?
Director Cummings?
Yes, thank you. So I think it's really telling actually, and it's a strategy I use. So it's a little bit of a trade secret, but you can really understand in the psyche of a type of manager if you're the type of manager where you sit in your office and you have everyone come to you, or if you are the type of manager where you get out into the hallways and you go to the departments. So for instance, I make a point to go to the assessing office twice a week. And I'm in there not just talking to some of the more senior assessing folks, but I'm talking to the administrative assistants. And so I'm trying to do that to be available, to be accessible, to be there, to have them develop the trust, which ultimately comes with time and good communication. And so as they start to see and learn my values, and they understand how we should be prioritizing for the benefit of the Nashua taxpayer, certain process, certain resources, I'm hoping that my leadership would spur that confidence, and all I can point to is my current track record. I mean, I think you can look to the current folks who work with me for the betterment of the city of Nashua is really all I can say.
May I make 2 more comments, please, if that's possible?
Alderman
Thank you. One thing is I want to say is that you made a comment about that you had limited resources. Those resources were in staffing. Amy is incredible, as is Jill, and I know that you would not do as good a job in those areas if you didn't have them. So kudos to them, and it's a testament to you that they came here tonight on their own time to speak out and to say that they hope their department's gonna follow you. That speaks volumes. They're not sitting there hoping. But one of the comments that also was made about was, and I think it was meant that we would have a big hole to fill if we put you into a different position. I don't think that should ever be a reason why we didn't put someone into a new position. The great thing is we would have you here to do what we used to call in Department of Defense a fill behind. So you would be there to help escort that person and so on. And maybe it would be new blood, maybe it would be somebody within the city. So I think it still would be a good, because we would have you here in that position rather than one of my biggest fears was that once the Performing Arts Center, and I even told you that, was gone, we would lose you. So I don't mind losing you in economic development as long as we keep you here in the city, so thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I look at these roles as very different. I see one as managing projects, and I see one as managing people. From where you sit and approach these roles, how do you think they're different, and how do you think they're similar?
Well, I'll start with how I think they're similar, if I may, Madam Chair. Thank you. So I think that's a fair observation. Managing projects versus managing people is very true. I think when you're managing projects, you are managing people. There's a team of people executing on all the various projects. And I am very much helping to facilitate and coordinate and manage those teams to be able to execute on the projects. And so that is a similarity that I see. Another similarity that I see is I look at the municipal corporation of the city of Nashua as an organization, and this organization has the same various issues that a project has, whether it's resource issues or problems that come up, that arise, and you need to problem solve. And I know I need to use those skill sets that I've developed when it comes to the project management to solve those problems, to now apply it to more organizationally centered or centric type of problems that arise, but it's the same skills that I would be looking to utilize. How I see them being a little bit different, with a project, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. This is going to be more programmatic or more process-driven change, which what I anticipate happening, and something I want to set expectations on, is it's going to be slower. Rome wasn't built in a day. What we should be looking at is incremental progress. The collective bargaining agreements that we work within are decades old. It's the same document that is, been utilized, and what we have to do is be willing to accept incremental progress, where we create efficiencies, where we look to improve upon what was done before.
Alderman Sullivan.
Thank you. As a follow-up to that, can you tell us from either the role that you're currently in or one of your past roles, a specific example of when you had to coach an employee through a difficult situation, either with a project or something going on in your department?
Director Cummings.
Sure.
You can leave names out of
Yeah.
it.
Especially if it's me.
Yeah. If I may, Madam Chair, I definitely think I have had to coach some of the folks that I work with through stressful situations or problematic situations, and help provide them what I consider the support to be successful. More often than not, as a cheerleader, someone to encourage them, to give them the confidence and help them be successful, because I see their success. They may just not see it themselves yet. And so having an ability to communicate with people, and the interpersonal skills that I've actually developed because of economic development, I think has helped me be a better manager of people. And so whether it's something that comes up from a customer service standpoint when it comes to parking, or whether it's helping a newly elected member of the Board of Aldermen understand process, I'm there to be a resource to help help everyone be the best person that they can be.
Thank you.
Is that Alderman Sullivan?
Thank you.
Alderman Dowd.
Yeah, I'm gonna make a few statements and make them quick, hopefully. First of all, it came up about Director Cummings' accessibility. I've never had a problem getting together with him on any subject. In fact, many of our communications are in the evening. Sometimes as we're both driving in cars going in opposite directions. But anytime I've tried to get a hold of him, if I didn't reach him, he'd get right back to me. So I think he's done that. The other thing that, as I've worked closely with him now, even more closely with a couple of projects, the thing that amazes me is his ability to multitask and take on many things and do them well. He's never late for meetings, and he has a lot of them. And a lot of his projects are coming to fruition. The Performing Arts Center, the new apartment building on School Street, the DPW project. And the DPW project alone, when we first started this project, it was new to some degree for Director Cummings to be managing the team, if you will. I tried to assist where I could since I've done a number of these projects. And he's picked it up extremely quickly and has done a phenomenal job in managing this program, and it should be completed in February. It would be done sooner for one of our major suppliers, but we won't get into that. And as far as the Capital Improvements Committee, I worked with Director Sullivan and Director Cummings on there need to be changes to that because it doesn't work the way it should. The other thing is that in large companies, like I worked for BAE for 30 plus years, and when a new director, vice president, whoever was being selected to a major position, it was almost universally somebody from within, and it wasn't up for vote. Whoever the senior person above them selected them. Now, I know it's a little different here in city government, but it's if you have someone that's uniquely qualified to handle that position, you trust them and you know they'll do a good job and you need to have a good job done, you pick that person. So I fully support Director Cummings in this role.
Thank you.
All set, Alderman Dowd?
Yes.
Alderman Clemmons?
Thank you. I've been listening to the conversation here tonight, and I agree with most of what's been said. I can say for a fact that, Tim, you and I have agreed on many things. We've disagreed on many things. But in the end, you know, we always come to understand that the approach is really for, whether we agree or not, for the betterment of the city. And I think that's the important thing. You know, and so I don't have any objection to you moving over to the administrative service position. I think it will be, I think you'll serve there very well, and you have my full support.
All set, Alderman Clemmons?
Yes.
Great. Okay. I have a couple questions, and I will echo some of the things that have been said. I think that the mayor has always brought forward people who are qualified for these positions that he knows internally will do a good job. I am inclined to trust him on those. You see this happen all day. You're in these departments. But I also agree with the conversations around it's our job to interview and ask questions. This is a big role. And it sounds like you're up for the job, but that is what this committee is for. So my question, actually, I'm just going to leave it to one question. I think it's no secret that customer service in general has been a thing that we have heard a lot about, especially in the Board of Aldermen, whether it is connected to you or not. And your earlier statement, you said that you would really like to focus very heavily on that. So I really want to know what you think you will be able to do for the customer service role, and making sure that people feel that we're accessible and transparent and people can get what they need from the city.
If I may. So
Dr. Cummings, would you?
Thank you. So a couple of strategies that I have in the back of my mind. One, bringing in some training and professional development from, you know, an outside expert to help people deal with difficult personalities and just difficult customers, and make sure you're doing it in a way that's professional and doing it in a way that validates someone's experience, but not necessarily minimizes or demonizes or creates a negative response by that individual, but in a way that everyone can feel as though that they're being heard. And there's outside professional development trainings that you can bring in that I would like to bring into the various groups. I think some of it is also a resource issue, and I'm not going to be shy to say that I am going to tell you when I think you need additional capacity in some of the departments, because one of the first things that goes is customer service when employees are stressed and they're just trying to do their job the best that they can, and they are getting pulled in many different directions, and they're not able to provide the level of service that they even want to provide. And I'm gonna tell you that. The other thing is I see that we as a municipal corporation sometimes lack unified policies and process. And if I can help play a small role in bringing about some sort of standardization that can give comfort and develop a culture that would allow someone to rely on certain things and know this is consistently how it's being done. Because this is not like engineering where you are given a design and you're getting from A to B. You can do things in government many different ways and end up at the same spot. So what it really comes down to is discipline and routine and having those structures in place. All things that I've learned along the way in my career that I've seen done that helps give the consumer and the taxpayer confidence in their local government.
Great. I said I was going to do one, but I'm going to do one more. I was very happy to hear from your team members this evening. They spoke very eloquently on your behalf. Your team now is smaller, and you would be stepping into a role where there would be a lot more people that you'd be managing. Do you imagine your management style shifting in order to support a larger team?
No, if I may, Madam Chair. I don't see my management style shifting. I think, one of the things that I want to bring is my type of management style to this position. It is definitely has more internal employees, no question, but as mentioned earlier, the projects that I'm managing has teams of various professional consultants all playing a role, and I interact with them regularly.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions from anyone on the board? Okay, thank you. We'll take up your nomination in
Thank you.
a little bit.
All right, Madam
Yep, so
Chair.
we're going to move on to the Business and Industrial Development Authority.
We have Jaron Thomas Slattery, term to expire October 1st, 2025, new appointment.
Read the address as well.
The address is 229 Main Street, 17 Berkeley Street, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03064.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, would you like to speak to your?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I am nominating Jaron Slattery to the position of the Business and Industrial Development Authority. There are a couple of vacancies there, and we're looking for good people with very knowledgeable industry experience to fill those positions. And we sort of had at the Business and Industrial Development Authority, kind of a brainstorming on who would be good. And Jaron's name came up because he has been involved in home building and economic development as part of Edgestone Properties for a long time. Of course, we all recall Jaron's father, Kevin, who unfortunately passed away a couple years ago, who was the leader of Edgestone Properties. Jaron has worked with him and with this company for quite a while. After attending high school, and here in Nashua and going to the University of Georgia and getting a landscape architecture degree. He's very knowledgeable in terms of trying to provide housing for Nashuans and for people in this region, having developed much of it himself. He's done a number of developments. They're high quality, and they serve a number of different demographics. Some are elderly projects, some are not. In other words, the senior type housing that we see in various locations in the city, that we have increased density in order to induce senior 55 and over housing. And I know after talking with other members of the Business and Industrial Development Authority who have known Jaron, know him better than I, and have known him certainly much longer, that he will be a very good fit and will help us provide direction to our economic development and business development efforts.
Great.
So I will turn to Jaron and ask him just to say a little bit about himself and about his interest in this position.
Mr. Slattery.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mayor Donchis. Thank you to the committee as well. Those not on the committee that are here tonight, thank you all as well, aldermen and alderwomen who serve the city. You know, I don't like talking about myself a ton, so I'll start by thanking you guys here a little bit. You know, I listened to Director Cummings earlier, and I think you guys serve a city of 91,000, and you have about half a dozen people that come in here and kind of interrupt the ongoings of the chamber here. And I think those percentages kind of speak volumes to what you guys do for the city. As a citizen and as a business owner in the city, it's pretty commendable. You guys should hang your hat on what those percentages look like, and we thank you for your service. So just a brief little bit about myself. Thank you very much for the introduction, Mayor Donchis, very kind introduction. Edgestone Properties, we're a real estate development company doing business here in Nashua. We've been here since 1984, as Mayor Donchis stated, founded by my father, Kevin. I've worked for him since coming back from college in 2004, and then went from starting in the field, putting sewer lines in and water lines in and running excavation equipment to project management, and then I guess by unfortunate circumstance becoming president in 2020. So we've continued to have some nice success here in the city. It's our home. It's our home for business. It's my home. I live on Berkeley Street. It actually happens to be I grew up on Berkeley Street. I grew up at number 54. I currently live with my wife and daughter at 17 Berkeley. My mother still resides at 54. So city has been home for a number of years, home for business and where we rest our head. You know, our business is sort of twofold. We're a real estate development company that does 40 to 50 new construction homes a year, as well as we have a rental portfolio, properties that we've acquired and properties that we've built and kept in a rental portfolio that we own and operate. You know, we're Southern New Hampshire, Hudson, Amherst, Nashua, Merrimack, Hollis. But the last, we kind of bounce around, obviously, where land availability is. The last 12 years, we've been kind of right here. We've been right in Nashua. So, you know, in the past 15 years, we've done 300 new construction units here in the city of Nashua alone. And the lion's share of our rental properties are right here in the city. So I don't plan on going anywhere. The company doesn't plan on going anywhere. And that kind of parlays into BITA for me a little bit. So I was approached by a couple members after they had kind of brainstormed who to bring onto the committee with a couple open seats, as Mayor Donchis alluded. I thought it was a unique opportunity. I thought it was a unique time for BITA. You know, you look at RSA 162G, which is sort of the formation of the Business Industrial Development Authority. And I think we see that the primary role is to foster and support economic development of a city. So, you know, you almost want to look at the B and the I, the business and the industrial piece of that, and say, well, is it always going to be business and industrial? Well, look at the primary role of BITA here in Nashua over the last, 10 years anyway, and it's been primarily all residential projects that they've been involved with. I think we take a quick little look at that. That's probably because the primary need for economic support in the city happened to come from housing. So I think that's where the focus went. And I think that's the direction that BITA ultimately needs to find themselves going, is what avenue is going to affect the economic development in the brightest light, in the most positive way. So I'm interested to get involved with the board. I know a number of the current members, past chair. So I think we're at a unique crossroads here with it. Land's becoming scarce. I think we kind of all know that. So we're going to have to see a shift here. So a lot of redevelopment opportunities, as we can see from what's happening in the city right now. So I don't have a ton more to say to you guys. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight, and I appreciate the opportunity to hopefully serve on this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Slattery. Alderman Lopez.
So your resume tells me that you're a very, very active person. It's actually struck me as being an incredibly efficient use of space with the amount of different things that you were able to put in there. But it also doesn't indicate any further activity beyond 2005, which I feel like has an obvious, is this an older resume? And if so, what kind of things are you connected to and engaged in more recently?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Mr. Slattery, go ahead.
Thank you for the question, Alderman Lopez. First off, definitely thanks for the question. I came here tonight after I watch a ton of these. If we're not here, I watch a ton of these. I follow minutes. And I said to myself, man, I'm really failing in life if I don't get a question from Alderman Lopez.
So, I know. When I don't ask, everyone's like, are you okay over there?
So I appreciate the question. It's interesting. So Chair Jason Havlin, we had a phone interview, and he was going to submit my name to the mayor after having a little phone interview, and he called me back out of the blue and said, could you please submit a resume? I wish I had access to the email that I sent to him, where I said, geez, I can pull one up. I'm going to need a little bit of time if you want me to freshen it up, because I said, you know, one of the things that happens when you get into a family business early out of college is you find yourself going back through about 3 laptops to find where that last resume was. So he actually told me to submit what I had, which is what I did. So you're 100% correct. That is the resume from about 2004, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, I can't remember. So it's a good question. That's why you see those dates the way you see them. It is a very old resume. I don't see a ton. I didn't see a ton of need in updating it unless the city wanted it. To answer the rest of your question, so our involvement, my involvement is, you know, my father, before he passed, was heavily involved in charity work throughout the city. Not necessarily boards like this or the board that I'm nominated for tonight, although he did serve on several, but he was involved with Home Health Hospice, United Way, Front Door Agency, and a number of other nonprofits, Girls Inc., just to name a few. There was a lot of them that he started to get involved with, and I've made an effort to, although I've failed in the capacity that he certainly was involved with them, whether that be due to business structure changes or such, but or a young family at home at this point. He was able to start to get heavily involved at the point of his career that he was in. My brother and I both grown up and moved out of the house and started our own families, and he was able to fill his extra minutes with those involvements. And we've done the same, both myself personally and as a company. We are still heavily involved with home health and hospice care, and we are a very strong supporter of United Way of Greater Nashua. So hopefully that answers your question and maybe kind of takes both pieces of that.
Alderman Lopez, follow up?
Yep, I would just say it's never failure to aspire to meet the inspiration that somebody who's amazing has given you. And the question was really just because I saw a very, very active person represented in their resume, and I wanted to make sure you had a chance to speak to that aspect of it. So I appreciate your thoughts, your comments, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Alderman Sullivan and then Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the aldermanic representative of the BIDA, and we didn't have a quorum on Friday, I would hope this committee would support, because we need the bodies. But I would, as a longtime resident, you've done business in the city, and since this committee, like you said, fosters and supports the economic development of the city, not to put you on the spot, but I will. What do you think is the one thing the city can do to foster and support economic development?
Mr. Slattery?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it's interesting. I'm going to probably list something that happens to be an avenue of work that I'm in, but it happens to also be what I think is probably the highest demand in the city right now, and that would be affordable housing. You know, I just came from the United Way sleep out on the 14th of October, and I listened to every organization that got up and spoke talk about how affordable housing is just absolutely killing, or lack of affordable housing is absolutely killing their opportunities as a organization. They're short on housing, and you know, you're looking at these organizations turning people away. Now that we're talking one extreme to another, I think there's a middle ground here, but I think we're missing an opportunity to provide housing for families that fall into that area median income right now. I think it's just, I think what housing has done over the last couple of years has pushed it to just an unattainable spot. On the heels of that are rents that are through the roof. Where do people go? You know, I don't know that Alderman Sullivan, I don't know that 100% answers the question as it relates to BIDA, because I think BIDA encompasses a lot more, but I think looking at opportunities on some of these lands and some public-private partnerships that can be put in place to work towards increasing affordable housing in the city is paramount here as we move forward.
Yes, thank you.
All set, Alderman Sullivan. Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Mr. Slattery, hi, I am your alderman. I don't know if we've ever met before. And thank you for coming forward. I appreciate anybody who volunteers to be on these committees. It's important to have citizens who live and work in the community, and you meet both of those criteria. And I also appreciate the question that Alderman Sullivan had asked you, and I really do appreciate your answer. Housing is something that is extremely important. And I do think, in essence, and please correct me if you disagree with me, I do think in essence that housing is so important for business development. You literally have to have them here or in the surrounding area for businesses to want to come in. They can't hire people. or they can't get people to live here, this is an issue. So I do appreciate you speaking to that. Affordable housing is, and Alderman Lopez's favorite word of affordable housing is a definition that's really hard to define sometimes. I mean, to really put your head on it. I've often heard people say things like, we need that kind of, the blank spot of the middle housing. It seems to be missing. We have high housing, we have low income housing, but that middle housing. Do you consider the middle of the round to be what you would consider affordable? Or is your definition of affordable is just basically what the market will bear? Not mine, but.
Mr. Slaughter?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alderwoman Clee. I think affordable housing is a little more all-encompassing than picking one segment of the market. I would say that it is not the latter of your definition, which was where market rate bears now. I believe affordable housing encompasses those two lower brackets that you referred to, which is that midline and below. That being said, and I think this is where BIDA comes in, and I think this is where we can make some nice strides here. How do you incentivize developers enough to be able to provide such housing without getting more people sitting in those seats over there blasting this chamber that you've sort of handed freebies to developers, right? So it has to fall in kind of a sweet spot, and the incentivization has to be such that it's enough for the developer to be able to provide, but it's not so much that it creates that public animosity where they feel as though freebies are getting handed out and there's backroom deals going on. So it's a very interesting spot, and you know, I'm excited. I'm excited to get involved, and I'm excited to start talking about some of these very things.
Just two more. Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you so much for that answer. I really appreciate it, and I would be remiss to not say how sorry I was for the loss of your dad, especially under those circumstances with everything that happened. But having said that, it also means that you had big shoes to fill, and that's not always easy either. You talked about all of those things that he was doing and so on. And you have a young family at home, so I see that you will soon be in those shoes and striding even better. One of the things that you commented about was redevelopment. When you speak about BIDA working for, because we don't have a whole lot of land, having to redevelop, are you thinking of maybe some factories or some older homes that are doing that, thinking about bringing business and industry in? What do you consider redevelopment? I mean, obviously we have the conversation about the asphalt plant coming in, and I don't want to do that controversy, but how do you bring business in that will work within the community? How do you see BIDA working in that way?
Mr. Slaughter, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Another good question. Mayor Donchis, I thought you said it was all softballs tonight.
Sorry.
No, so, you know, I don't think I can sit here right now and tell you that I have a plan, or I'm gonna go in and try to revamp BIDA. I'm gonna jump in, I'm gonna get knee deep, and I'm gonna try to be part of a team that's already got some momentum going. We'll try to create a little more momentum behind that and get it moving. You know, I guess I look at a couple bigger parcels that the city doesn't currently have, but they fall within the confines of this city that are extremely underutilized right now. You know, I'll use Daniel Webster College as an example. There's going to be some changes there at some point in time, and where does that go? So, you know, deeply exploring some, you know, like some bond structures, public-private partnerships on some of these pieces that lay sort of semi-dormant right now, that are pretty vibrant pieces, but drastically underutilized. So, you know, I don't know that I can directly answer the question. Get my feet wet a little bit with the committee and then start to move forward with things here.
Thank you, and just one more.
Follow-up.
I appreciated that answer, believe it or not. I'm not always happy when people come in and they're telling me how they're going to change the world. So I appreciate you saying that you're going to work with the committee that's already there. And I saw that you had some, you know, good recommendation as far as doing that. And I think that's a wise move. Come in, listen, and add to the conversation rather than trying to take it over. So thank you for your answer. I think it was very thoughtful.
Thank you.
All set, Alderman Smith?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Any other questions from the committee? Alderman Clemmons and then Alderman Camo.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, first of all, that I can remember working, I've been on the Board of Aldermen since 2008, and I can remember working with your dad, and he was a great guy. And so, you know, very, very sorry for his loss and your loss. But thank you for coming forward and trying to fill those shoes. I really appreciate that, and I think you will do very well on the Business Industrial Authority, because I too agree that housing is sort of the apex of where the conversation has to be in Nashua, and so I think your expertise will add a good element to that committee. So thank you.
All set, Alderman Clemmons?
Yep.
Alderman Camo?
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to tack on to something that my colleague from Ward 9 said earlier. I also am on the bid. I'm John's alternate. And we had some problems recently with quorum. And so I'm just curious, don't take this the wrong way, but you don't look like an older retired person. So I'm assuming that you have demands on your time. And we generally meet during the day. Is this something, I mean, professionally, you seem like a very good fit for the board, but is this something, the time commitments you're going to be able to commit to? I just wanted to make sure I was able to give you a softball question.
Mr. Slattery?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Alderman Como. It actually is one of the enticing pieces of this committee or the authority, because the times lend itself a little better for me personally than with a young family coming here at night. So having the flexibility running the company to be able to scoot out on a 9 a.m. and make that happen is actually quite intriguing to me. So,
Thank you.
All set, Alderman Camo? Any other questions from the board?
Madam Chair, I'd like to say before Mr. Slattery leaves that he is an honors graduate of the University of Georgia. And I believe from looking at his resume, he has an interest in football. Now, Georgia is playing Tennessee this Saturday. And Alderman Gouveia and I are in a competition to try to figure, you know, over the weeks to who can pick the most winners with several other people on George Russell's radio show. And I'm just telling him now, I'm picking Georgia over Tennessee. So I'm giving Alderman Gouveia that heads up.
so I had, if I may,
Mr. Slattery?
when I spoke with Jason, Chair Havlin, you know, he, when he briefly looked at my age-old resume, he commented on the fact that as he was reading it, he was leaving to bring his daughter to the University of Georgia for her freshman year. So when I looked at his resume and realized he went to Michigan, I was happy to see that he's at least smartened up a little bit over the years. So,
Oh, boy. All set. Thank you, Mr. Slattery. We'll be taking up your nomination in a little bit. Do we have Emily Vassar here?
Yes, Emily, please come up.
Come join us.
So Madam Chair, I am appointing Emily Vassar to the Housing Trust Fund. We are seeking, and the ordinance asks us to appoint someone with lived experience concerning affordable housing. And Ms. Vassar has come forward with a great interest in the subject, in this board, and with the lived experience. As you can see from her submission, she currently, has a good job and lives in French Hill, but in the past has struggled with the problem of not being able to afford a, reasonable place to live, and so very well understands what people are struggling with in the community. And she definitely has an interest in this committee, and I will be a great complement to others that we've appointed, our, lawyers and others that have various expertise in this housing area. So I'm glad to be appointing her, and I will ask Ms. Vassar to tell you a little about herself and of her interest in affordable housing and in this trust fund in particular.
Thank you, Ms. Vassar.
My name is Emily Vassar. I grew up on the cusp of French Hill on Granite Street, and now I live further back on Chandler Street, so still in the old neighborhood. And I grew up in varying degrees of financial stability or instability. And I've lived it my adult life. So, currently I am living check to check, paycheck to paycheck. Sometimes when I pay rent, I don't know if I'll be able to pay, this bill or that bill, get groceries, buy my dogs really expensive food, stuff like that. So, I'm living it still today, even though I'm in a better place than I have been in the past. But I have more concern for other people than I do for myself, to be perfectly honest. When you guys talk about housing instability and affordable housing, my ears perked up and I was like, oh, this is my jam. This is what I want to talk about. And there wasn't a whole lot of mention of what I think of when you say affordable housing and housing insecurity. And that's homelessness. And that is, the fact that there's a lot of people out there who are struggling, not just month to month, but maybe week to week. Not just with making rent, not just with paying bills, not just with buying food, but with staying alive. So I just want to remind everyone that, maybe I shouldn't say remind you because you might not agree with me, but it's my strong belief that every city is only as strong as the person or people who are struggling the most. So I want to have conversations that make a difference, and I want to ask questions, and I want to learn how to make a difference. So I thank you for your nomination.
Thank you, Ms. Vassar. That was really lovely. Let's go with Alderman Clemens and then Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you for coming forward. I have one question. When you're in the room with the lawyers, the real estate managers, and all those people on that committee, will you continue to speak the way you just did?
I hope so.
Then you have
yeah, absolutely.
Then you have my vote.
Thank you.
Because you're going to be the voice for the people who are living in these housing units that we do, and the one who advocates as the person who knows.
The lived experience. Yep.
And so, thank you.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you, first of all, for stepping up. These committees can be intimidating in its theory, right? You got to be there with, again, lawyers and, not to any lawyer in the room cover their ears, but, may think they're better than other people, right? And so to Alderman Clemens' point is to continue to speak up and to be that voice. Honestly, if it was up to me, I don't think you're enough. I think we need more people that have lived it, because we need stronger voices out there. I mean, I've never been homeless, so I don't know how that feels. I've lived on the tree streets as a kid, and so, I've lived in apartments that are falling apart and stuff like that. So I understand that piece of it. I certainly don't understand being homeless or maybe not even paycheck to paycheck, but I do know that we need to pay attention to that as much as we can. And I know, to Alderman Lopez's credit, he continues to always voice that opinion out there, and I will support that every time, and I'm glad that you're here, and I just want to thank you for joining this, because we need the voice out there, and I don't think we've had it, and so thank you very much for stepping up.
Alderman
May I
Bea?
respond? I would just like to.
Oh, sure.
I would just like to respond. You touch on a lot of stuff that is constantly rolling around in my head, and I do have lived experience, but I don't, just like you, know the harder aspects of housing insecurity. I have been homeless, but I had couches to crash on. I have gone without food, but all it really took was, a phone call maybe to get some help. Many, many, many people don't have that opportunity. I've lived on the tree streets. I've lived in, my first apartment. My landlord was a crackhead. And, sorry to use that kind of terminology, but that's what he was, And, he went into bankruptcy and lost the building, and I was without a place to live for a little bit. And the stairs were falling apart. And I could smell crack on my third floor apartment. It was bad, People have problems that aren't theirs to become their problems. And I think that's something that we have to keep in mind. People get Section 8, and landlords are like, I'm all set. They think drama. They think baggage. They think, screaming kids, and, there goes the security deposit and all this and damages. It's not what it is. Human beings who don't get to complain about how high a deposit is for a house. They don't get to complain about how, hard it is to pay for their manicure. We got to have those conversations, and I just really appreciate you pointing out what you did. Yeah.
I'll set Ms. Vassar. Alderman Bea?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming forward. I think you're exactly what is needed on the committee, and your voice and just the way you present yourself is just really great. And it's exactly what's needed on that committee. And your comments on Section 8 housing of what you just said was spot on. I grew up, and my grandmother used to own rental properties on Cross Street. And they were Section 8 housing. And I'll tell you, the people who lived in there were they were great people. They were hard workers, just a little down on their luck, trying to get back on their feet. And I think your comments there were very spot on. And I look forward to voting on your nomination. Thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
I just wanted to also say yours is the voice that I think that committee needed. I'm very glad that Mayor Donchis found somebody who's willing to step forward, because I know when you don't have a lot, it's hard to give more. But I've also found that working with people who have nothing, they're much more willing to give everything. So I appreciate you being that embodiment. I would say your voice will not be the only voice. You're not alone at all. I think it's a mistake for people to assume that other people on the committee haven't necessarily experienced homelessness or struggled with their own circumstances. But I don't think everybody is willing to step forward and express what they've struggled with to the extent that you're willing to. And I think that is empowering others to do that too. I think even in this chamber, people are identifying and aligning and saying, okay, wait, this is something that I've encountered myself, experienced with myself, and your leadership is already present in this chamber. Your humility and willing to say, look, I haven't seen everybody's circumstances, is just being fair, because everybody I've ever met who's struggled with homelessness, whether it's unsheltered on the street across the street from us tonight, or whether it's people who are couch surfing, or people who are in residential programs for special populations that maybe are feel trapped there, but at the end of the day, they do have a place to sleep. They have running water, electricity, all that kind of stuff. They all struggle with their own version of lack of housing choice. And I think it's important for us as a city to have the diversity and the equity in our housing choice allotments. That's why I think the Housing Trust Fund is important, but an affordable housing trust fund is essential. And we need to remain focused on that goal and that intent, even where the language might shift. And there may be lawyers in there, and there may be people with more sophisticated credentials. They've spent more in their tuition or whatever, but their voices are not going to be any more valid than yours. And I think you can lead them and you can inspire them with your story and the tenacity that it informed in you. So I'm very happy to see you put forward as a nominee. I appreciate your comments tonight, and I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and again, I'm your alderman. I'm beginning to feel like looking at this. This is going to be the Ward 3 interview. We have one more coming up, so first I want to say is based on everything that you've been through, I see empathy, and that is so important to not necessarily have walked in someone else's footsteps, but to understand. When I ran for alderman, the place that I spent all my time talking to people was in French Hill. And the reason for it was because I wanted them to know, I do hear you. I grew up like that. I grew up in the projects of Holyoke, Massachusetts. We had a refrigerator repossessed and kept our food on the side porch all winter long because we couldn't afford a refrigerator. I know what it felt like to feel every month whether or not you were gonna have electricity, sometimes not going to school because we didn't have heat. So I understand that, but that doesn't mean that I know how everybody else feels. I was young and I handled it my way. But you have the empathy, you've gone through all of this. And sometimes when we, as Alderman Clemens said, we have to stand up to people who think that they know more than we do. You have lived it, you have watched it, you have seen it, and you can give them a new perspective. And it sounds like you're doing it without anger, but without doing that. And to me, that is extremely important. You're a voice of reason. So thank you so much for standing up. And I want to tell you that I hear from constituents weekly, not monthly, not once in a while, weekly, their fear of speaking up based on their housing situation. We have some incredible landlords in this city, and we have some not so much. And Section 8, as you speak of, at any time, someone can say, I'm not going to do Section 8, or I'm going to remove these people because I want to upgrade it so I can get bigger rents and not Section 8. So it's important that we have this housing trust fund. And we keep talking about the word affordable. I think the word affordable is a very fluid word. Depends where you live, what your circumstances are. So I feel like I'm just singing your praises, but I'm blown away by your comments, and I can hear the emotion behind you, so thank you.
So I would like to say thank you so much for coming forward. Your comments and your story are incredibly moving. As somebody who's worked in homelessness for 20 years, you reminded me how easy it is to sort of get tunnel vision when you're working on things like affordable housing. This is such an important thing for our city, and it's easy to get focused on the units and how many units, but ultimately they're connected to humans, and you humanized the reason why we're doing this. So thank you very much for doing that. I think it's going to be incredibly important as a member of this committee to keep bringing that forward and telling your story and making sure that it is heard in equal measure to all the other people on this committee, because that is ultimately what we're trying to do. Make sure that everyone has a safe and affordable place to live. So thank you so much for your powerful interview, and I'm looking forward to confirming your appointment on the committee. You're all set. We'll take it up to nomination in a couple more interviews.
Now, Madam Chair, we have Maroney Camille.
Is Mr. Lyle not here?
Mr. Lyle is not here.
Okay, so we'll
But
keep his
Mr.
appointment
Camille
for a
is.
later date. And then they're both cable and television
Yes.
advisory. Okay.
Yes.
So to the Cable Television Advisory Board, we are Looking to,
Ronnie Camille, no appointment, 79 Chandler Street, number 2, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03064, term to expire November 1st, 2025.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm nominating Roni Camille to the Cable TV Advisory Board. As you see from his resume, he has perfect experience for this board. He works for the town of Tingsboro and has for some years in media programming, and he's developed a lot of media tools for the town of Tingsboro. He lives in Nashua. He's actually a neighbor of Ms. Vassar, lives nearby, lives in French Hill. And, I could talk more about him, but it's a little late, and he's a perfect fit for this. And so I'm glad to be submitting his nomination, and I will just turn to Mr. Camille and ask him to tell you a little bit about himself and of his interest in the Cable TV Advisory Board.
Mr. Camille?
Madam Chair, through you, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of this committee. Pronouncer is Roni Camille, like Tony with an R. If you could say Tony, you could say Roni. I born in Montreal, son of Haitian immigrants, and moved here in 1996. Product of Nashua Public Schools, went to North Carolina Central University. I've worked in broadcast. I'm a journalist by trade. Worked in at the national level and local level, and municipal experience in Tingsboro. I'm a public servant. The folks that work in the news industry provide a public service in informing the public. I've used those tools with the town of Tingsboro to offer that in the public access educational programming and government. It is one of the cornerstones of our democracy. And as a Nashua resident, I'd be honored to offer my expertise for the city of Nashua, for the community that I've been loved for so many years. I live in French Hill. My wife and our daughter was 1.5 years. And I yield my time, and I'd be happy to answer more questions to this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Camille. Do we have questions from our committee members? Alderman Clemens.
Thank you. Roni, I think you and I have met. I know I grew up across the street from your wife on Kinsley Street. But I did not know how extensive your background was in, particularly in the cable business, and was very impressed reading that. And, I think you're going to be a fantastic person on this committee. So I look forward to, I don't have any questions, but I look forward to supporting your nomination.
Anybody else? Alderman Lopez, then Alderman Clee.
Yep, I just want to thank you for stepping forward. I too have seen you around town, encountered you in different places. I was very impressed by your resume. It's very up to date. There's also multiple letters expressing your interests, so a lot of my questions here are kind of covered. I was interested to see that you have that interest in the aircrafts as well, so I don't know if the mayor's aware and we need anybody for Air Force Advisory Board, but probably just throw it out there. I was a little curious, just as a piece of trivia, in your audio section above podcasting, you wrote something down as Audacity, as something that you have if you have a proficiency in just being audacious, then I salute you, but is there more to it?
Madam Chair, through you. Madam Chair, through you. Audacity is a software that is used in the audio. It's a freeware software. I've used the gamut from Adobe Audition to Cool Edit. I will say this, and I say this to folks that are entering the industry. It's like riding a bike. You know the fundamentals. You could use any piece of the software.
All right. Well, thank you for answering fulfilling my curiosity. I salute you for learning it, and their marketing department for coming up with that.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you. And once again, one of my constituents, I'm beginning to think Ward 3 is a ward of volunteers. I know that many of the others do.
I've said that for years.
We are an outspoken group. And thank you for coming forward. I think your resume is quite impressive. I know you and I have talked back and forth on email as well. I think you're perfect fit for the job, and I appreciate the volunteerism. we have so many citizens who feel, want to speak out, and I applaud that as well. But those that step up and actually volunteer on the board is what we need more of. So thank you so much. Other than to just thank you, that's really all I have to say.
Anyone else? Thank you, Mr. Camille. Your nomination will come up in just a moment.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Mine Falls Park Advisory Committee.
Laura Santer, new appointment, 18 Grasmere Lane, Nashua, New Hampshire, 03063, term to expire November 1st, 2025.
Mr. Mayor.
Well, Madam Chair, as you know, Mine Falls is a very important facility, a very important park for us here in Nashua. Beautiful wilderness park, and we want people on that board. And we have an advisory board which helps to guide and provide advice regarding the best course for Mine Falls. Now, it is not often, or I guess I think I can say, I've never appointed someone before who was proficient in the reading of Latin, who can read elementary ancient Greek, and who speaks at least one other language in addition to English. So Ms. Santer is a honors, I think, first in her class graduate of St. Anselm's College. She went on to obtain a master's from Boston College, and fortunately for us has located herself here in Nashua. She's very interested in Mine Falls Park, would very much like to be on the advisory committee, and I believe that she will bring a depth of experience and of learning to that position. And so I'm very pleased to be appointing her, and I will just ask Ms. Santer to tell us a little bit about herself and of her interest in Mine Falls Park.
Ms. Santer.
Thank you. Thank you all for having me, and thank you for that introduction.
Just come a little bit closer to the mic so people can hear you.
We'll bring it closer.
Can you hear
I
okay?
hear you.
You can bring it closer to you.
It moves, you
Yeah.
pull it forward.
Yeah, you can
Okay.
physically move it. There you go.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I've been a resident of Nashua since 2017. I live here with my family, my mom, my dad, my little nephew, and before that I grew up in Hollis. So all that is to say that I've enjoyed Mine Falls for a very long time and continue to enjoy all that the park has to offer. As a philosophy student and someone who studies environmental ethics and public philosophy, I feel very strongly that public resources, in order to be shared in common, need to be maintained by the common people. And I would love to serve this committee however I can. I'm frankly embarrassed that I was not involved in the maintenance of this park sooner, but I look forward to your questions and to serving on the committee.
Thank you so much. Committee questions. Alderman Lopez.
So I noticed in your resume, you wrote a paper on the effects of government structures on individual liberties, but I used up all my grilling on Director Cummings. So I'd rather ask, Mine Falls is used by a lot of different people for a lot of different purposes. It's appreciated by runners who stampede through on their own schedule when they're doing races or trainings or things. It's enjoyed by slow bird walkers, people with dogs that bark everywhere, teenagers that are on their way from A to B to X to Y to Z, and even, unfortunately, people who are largely have nowhere else to go or to be. In your role as a Mine Fall Advisory Board, how do you manage all those different interests, and how do you see yourself contributing to a park that is well maintained and is enjoyable for the many, but also accessible to the individuals and the few who may have more specific needs?
If I may.
Ms. Santer.
So thank you so much for your question. And to be extremely honest, my first goal in sitting in on these meetings since August has been to be a sponge and to meet as many community members as possible. because I'm very nervous to speak on behalf of people that I haven't met or that I don't know. So I've participated in their trail days and tried to link up with as many different people as possible and learn how they access the park. For example, I didn't know that people or I guess I hadn't met anybody who kayaked down the canal in the park.
You've met the naked people.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess my response to you for now is that I'm learning about the different ways that people use the park so that I can hear them as opposed to speak for them at this moment.
Alderman Lopez.
I would just say that's the best answer I could hope for, because again, it's a very diverse place and the voices change periodically, the needs change. So I appreciate your willingness to listen.
Great. Alderman Dow.
I just want to say you graduated from an outstanding school. And you're sitting next to two alumni. I was just curious, where did you pick up those extra languages? Was that at St. A's? Because I never taught that when I was there.
If I may. So my Latin minor was picked up at St. Anselm College. We're required to do 3 semesters of a language, but I was close to the minor, so I just took it. And then Greek was part of my master's degree, and I'm still very elementary in the Greek. The Spanish is from high school.
Great. Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'm sorry that you're not in Ward 3, but you can move here. We're always looking for intelligent, wonderful people such as yourself. And to Alderman Lopez's, not all the dogs bark everywhere. My 2 don't, but putting that aside. Thank you for your answer to Alderman Lopez's. I think that was extremely thoughtful. And I'm glad to see that you are speaking to people from all over, and more importantly, listening. I think that's extraordinarily important. You talked about doing trail days. I think one of the best things that we can do for any of our parks and our city in general is the education. And I do have a question to that, but I do also want to say that I appreciated you saying that you're not going to speak for the committee or for any individual. You're going to be listening and doing that. So having said that, are there thoughts or ideas that you would have to help educate the public as to all the aspects of Mine Falls? I'm in there regularly, and sometimes I'm like, oh, I didn't even know this existed. I speak to people who don't understand that the soccer fields are there, or any of the aspects of it, that there's multiple entrances and parking lots. It's not just Lincoln Falls or over by Stello's or any of that. How do you foresee this advisory in educating the public, not just Nashua, but outside of Nashua? Thank you.
If I may. Thank you for your question. And I would say I already have a couple ideas in mind or things that have been discussed. So I think the biggest and easiest thing that we could do to get more people into the park and knowing what's going on is updating the website or the Facebook page, or even branching out into other platforms to recruit volunteers for things like trail days. I was talking to somebody at the last trail day who was saying that the dates were incorrect, or they didn't have the year on them on the website, and she knows to come because she knows it's one Saturday every month, but those dates correlate to a Wednesday. So that's a really simple fix that I, as a young technology literate person, would be happy to implement and get more people, young people, able-bodied people who can give their services on those trail days. Beyond that, I think one thing that's been discussed in meetings is updating the maps to the park, which for me, it was an interesting experience just coming to those meetings as somebody who knows the park backwards and forwards, but is not really familiar with the map. I felt oh no, I don't actually know where things are. But it's also the case that the map could be made more accessible to point out not just where different trails go, but what resources are available. Like, where are there dumpsters where trash can be disposed? Things like that are not necessarily marked on the map. So we've discussed maybe creating a new mapping system and printing new maps.
May I follow? Thank you for that answer, and thank you for bringing up the maps. I arrange Greyhound walks because I have 2 greyhounds, and so I have a walking group, and one of the things that I did was I took the map and I would tell everybody, we're going to start at this time, and this is the route we're going to take. We're going to take the purple route to the orange route, and at P whatever, and I said P means purple, and I had to educate them, and I would send them the map and I would highlight it. I like the idea that you're going to be doing that because people don't understand how we have all these trails, and one of the sad things is because they don't understand these trails exist, is they create their own, which is eroding some of our things. So I do appreciate that. And I appreciate also the fact that, as simple as it sounds, that you were bringing up comments of where are the trash, and I want to add the doggy stations. Also very important too, but thank you. I appreciate that answer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to say, I've spent lots of times in Mines Falls. I've coached over at Lincoln Park, and my kids have run Mines Falls for years, and one of them still does. And so it's important to me, even though it's not near me or not in my ward. It's a gem of the city, along with Greeley Park. It's really one of our gems, and it doesn't get as much notoriety as Greeley Park. And I think, the things you put forward here, just a couple of quick things is awesome. I think it's the way we need to go. And the other great thing is to see someone as young as Alderman Govea actually getting involved. So I love it. I love having the young people in the city get involved because it's so hard. And sometimes it's intimidating, but it's so hard for young people to get involved in doing these different things. And to see somebody with your knowledge, you may be the smartest person I've talked to in a long time. So, except maybe Alderman Lopez. But thank you for
right here, man.
thank you for stepping up, and I appreciate it. And tell your friends, get involved in city government because you guys are the future. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Just want to say thank you for stepping forward. I really appreciate you taking the time. Clearly, Mines Falls is something that is very important to you, and I think it's great that you found that. It's a place that I used to, as a kid, to go quite a bit, and as an adult, later on, I lived right behind or right in front of the park for a little bit, and just always been a place that I love, and so I like to see other people come forward. And the last comment I'm going to make is you can always tell a Nashua native, just like me and Alderman Tebow, we call it Mines Falls incorrectly all the time, but that's how you know if somebody was born in Nashua.
That's accurate. Thank you for stepping forward. Your resume is impressive. I am a Latin nerd as well. I took 4 years of Latin. I'm just going to have to overlook the Boston College thing as an alumni of BU. But thank you for coming forward. You're all set.
Thank you.
And Madam Chair, that's all we have.
That's all you have this
So
evening.
thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Natchez. So application to license hawkers, peddlers, iterant vendors license.
We have none.
Appointments by the mayor.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend the appointment of Timothy Cummings as the Director of Administrative Services with an indefinite term. The following new appointment to the Business and Industrial Development Authority, Jaron Thomas Slattery, with a term to expire October 1st, 2025. The following new appointment to the Housing Trust Fund Committee, Emily Vassar, with a term to expire October 1st, 2025. The following new appointments to the Cable Television Advisory Board, Roni Camille, with term to expire November 1st, 2025. And the following new appointment to the Mine Falls Park Advisory Committee, Laura Santer, with a term to expire November 1st, 2025.
Very nice job, Alderman Tebow. So discussion on the motion. All those in favor? Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say on the interview with Director Cummings, I just want to say that I feel that he is accessible to us on the board. So my question was more directed towards the criticism he had, not so much what we experienced, because I've always had good experiences. I will say, he's not in the room, but Alderman Sullivan knows how to interview. His questions are textbook out of how we interview people, so great job there. I don't think Director Cummings answered that question exactly. He didn't give a specific example, but I will support Director Cummings' promotion here, what we want to call it, because I believe he is the right person for this job, and I trust that the mayor did the right appointment. So thank you.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I too want to comment on the appointment of Director Cummings to the administrative position. One of the comments that I kind of made when I was talking was I made reference to General Billy at Westover Air Force Base. And General Billy was loved and known because of what Director Cummings said. He visited each department. He took the time to speak to all of the employees. And when you think of Westover Air Force Base, at that time we were still a reserve base, but it was still fairly large. And he always, like I said hello to every employee. And he took the time, more importantly, to listen. And he didn't judge us, and he didn't go running to our boss and say, you know, this employee complained about this and so on. So it was something that was extremely important. And I was glad to hear Director Cummings say that. And I think, I hope that you'll all give him a favorable, I think you will, thumbs up. Thank you.
All set? All those in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Unfinished business.
There is none.
New business resolutions.
There is none.
New business ordinances.
O-22-028, requiring non-public sessions to be entirely in person. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage, and I'd like to speak to my motion.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you. So this came up recently, and I was told that I was being divisive with this particular ordinance. And I want to explain that that's not my intention here. When we last had a non-public session, we had 3 people on non-public, all varying degrees of relationships that I have with those people. So it's not a divisive thing at all. I think previous to that non-public, we have never had a non-public go through Zoom. No?
During the pandemic, we did a bunch. Sorry.
Outside of the pandemic. Let me see, outside the pandemic, where everybody probably was on Zoom. We have not had a non-public session like that. My reasoning for this is simply the protection of the city. When people are at home, it doesn't matter if it's this board, the next board after that. It's not saying that I don't trust anybody in here. It's just all non-public sessions before used to be take your notes and have to give them to legal. Well, you can't do that when you're at home. And just because somebody says, well, I'm not going to do that. I don't know. I mean, I want to trust everybody. And the same thing could be said to me if I was at home. You know, last week on a radio show, there was a citizen that came out and said, hey, during a meeting, I had an alderman texting me stuff so I could respond to it. So it's not that people in this room don't do that, and that's fine because it's not a non-public session. But how can we guarantee anybody, whether it's me or anybody in this room, is doing anything like that or keeping notes or, you know, especially when we close our cameras off and we can't even see their faces. You know, so that's kind of where I was going with it. Again, it's not attacking the people that happen to be on it that night, because that could change from non-public session to non-public session, depending on who's sick or who's away from work or for work or someone. The other piece of it too that I feel very strongly about is that anytime we're gonna go into non-public session, we need to tell everybody and we need to give them some notice. I don't feel like that was really going to be done that night. And luckily it was, and everybody was able to be there that could be there in some form. I think that's not part of this, but I think it's something that we have to make sure everybody's available if they can be. We have to make sure that we take away all risk. I mean, we close the doors in here. You know, nothing can be said outside of the chamber. You know, I can't guarantee somebody's not in a shot when the thing's all all covered. So that's where I was going with it, and, you know, again, I'm not trying to be divisive or against any person.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I co-sponsored this, but I have a little bit of a different take on as to the reason why than the sponsor. And I don't think that he would necessarily disagree with me. I don't want to speak for you, but it's just a different thought. When we're in non-public session here in the chamber, it's the honor system, right? So we're not supposed to tell anybody what happens. We're not supposed to disclose anything. We're not supposed to record on our phones or another device or something like that, right? And as an elected official, we take that oath of office and we take it seriously. I don't think there's a person in here, in this room or that I serve with or have ever served with for that matter, that would have disavowed that oath and done something where they would have purposefully given out information from the meeting. I would like to believe that that would never happen in the future either. I also would like to believe that if it did happen in the future, that it would be something where that person, you know, would be taken to task, and whatever the penalty for that is under the law to the, you know, nth degree. My reason, so that brings me back to my point, which if you're a dishonest person, and you want to betray that public trust and betray the trust of your colleagues and everybody here, you can absolutely do that, whether we're in person or you're sitting at home online on Zoom. The reason that I support this is that the environment in a non-public session here is more controlled. So you have the people in the room that you can trust and that are entrusted with that information here. You can see them, you can hear them, whatever. You have to assume that they're going to do the right thing. The problem that I have with Zoom is that it could be hacked. And that's my biggest concern, is that somebody, if they got the link or if they knew somehow, could hack it and get in. And that's where I have an issue with it. And that's where I come from with this. I don't think it's anybody here. I don't think, as the sponsor said, I don't think it's a divisive thing. You know, it's a good tool. I didn't agree with taking away Zoom. I thought we should, you know, have it for the public too. I'm glad we still have it for this. But I think for non-public meetings, I think they're best done in person, because the information that's being discussed, we shouldn't put it out there for a hacker or somebody with an outside interest to get in. We should do everything we can to try to close that off. So that, for those reasons, that's the reason that I'm supporting this.
Alderman Lopez.
So I was very nearly one of the people who was in the remote non-public session. I managed to catch the bus and get myself here due to some strategic risk-taking and maybe possibly segueing across a massive parking lot and part of Daniel Webster Highway to catch the bus where I needed to. But I did that specifically because I understood how important it is to be in the room in a non-public session and be given the information and being grounded and focused on what's being presented. So I don't disagree with the intent of the legislation. I do have concerns that, number one, COVID isn't gone. And for all we know, some other crazy things can happen too. So I think we should reserve the right at some point to be able to change things in state of emergency. I'm comfortable with this legislation because I think we can always do that in a different way, the way we did with our other meetings where we changed the definitions of them. But it is a concern that I'm aware of, is that we should be careful not to over-tie ourselves to in-person meetings if we get into a situation where disease transmission is high and some of our members might be endangering their life to be in a meeting. I do have concerns about the other participants that might be involved in a non-public meeting. The assumption is that this would all be board members, but I don't know that somebody who's presenting information to us may necessarily be able to do that. So I'd ask the maker of the ordinance if there are any provisions for people who may be presenting from a distance or unable to attend, but essential to the process. And if Zoom is particularly a security concern, is there any option for teleconference through traditional means?
Alderman Tebow, would you like to respond?
Yeah, thank you. I do not have that currently in this legislation. You know, my thought too is if other people are presenting through Zoom, they haven't taken the oath that we have. So I don't, and again, I trust the city employees, but I don't know, if they're presenting something, I mean, at that non-public, people came in and presented things to us. So they were in the room.
Alderman Gavea?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I understand the concerns that Alderman Clemens brought up about the security viewpoint of it, and I do think that's absolutely reasonable, and I think it's something we should look into. I don't feel like we should be limiting Zoom, and I don't feel like we should be limiting it to a non-public. I do totally agree with everybody in here. It's a matter of trust. I have trust that the 15 of us will do the right thing, and I hope that continues, but I understand absolutely where you're coming from on it. The one thing I'm held up on is if I'm away on travel, or like Alderman Dowd was just out previously due to illness, if I couldn't make a non-public session because I'm on protocol, I then lose my vote in a non-public session, which we do handle important business in these non-public sessions. It's something I think all of us take seriously is what's discussed. I don't know. I feel every alderman should have the opportunity to join. Now, whether that be, should all the aldermen have to have cameras on? I'd be in favor of that during a non-public. I could get on board with that. But to take away options and take away potentially a vote or an alderman's input when they could have something of interest to say, I just don't feel is in the best interest of our group here. As it stands, I don't think I would support the recommendation of this ordinance, but I do understand where it's coming from. I just think there's other ways we could look at it, whether we use a different program to bring in us aldermen that's more secure, or we amend to make it so you have to have your cameras on during non-publics. I think there's just other avenues we could take, and I'm not going to say this is an overreaction because it isn't. I just think there hasn't been any precedent to tell me that this is necessary and needed, and that's kind of where I'm coming from on the ordinance. Thank you.
So I want to give my comment here. I also agree with a lot of what has just been said. I think that the pandemic is not over. I think that we have seen Zoom be successful. I think that if there were issues, legal and IT would have come to us and said that they were concerned about the technology and or the legality of doing these as non-publics on Zoom. I don't know that I heard that from anyone during the pandemic or since. So those are my concerns around this. I think that Zoom has given access to some of the comments that have been here to people who may have to be out for illness or might have to be traveling. But these non-publics, especially once that meeting is over, you're not supposed to talk about it. So and the meetings are sealed. So, to be able to be an effective representative of the people, you need to be able to have access to that. Now, should we be in person if we absolutely possibly can, even if that means going across the street on your Segway in Daniel Webster? Absolutely.
I was one wheel and it was crazy.
Absolutely. I think that is the best case scenario. But people have, illnesses and a lot of other things that might keep them from this from this chamber. And I think that we have to consider that. And we lived through it for 2 years. So in the current way this is written, I'm not comfortable supporting it. And then I see 2 hands, so let's go with Alderman Gavea.
Dowd.
Sorry, Alderman Dowd.
I mix them up myself.
I know.
So close to age.
Both like blue shirts.
It's already next
Blue
year.
one or blue
Sorry,
two.
Alderman Dowd.
So when this non-public in question came up, I was the first one to have concern. And I'll get into the other things in a minute, but the first thing I did was talk to Corporation Counsel Steve Bolton. And he said that it could be done because we didn't have an ordinance that prohibited it because Zoom wasn't around when the original ordinance was written. Couple things. One, if you violate the information in a non-public, you are subject to criminal activity. I don't know what the penalty is, but it's criminal activity because it's sensitive information. Now, I've been in non-public sessions, probably hundreds in the last 40 years, 20 years, whatever, I don't know, 40 years. And I can tell you that it's not everyone was there all the time. So if you weren't there, you weren't part of it. You could find out the information later, but they didn't even allow call-ins on the phone. And the reason it concerned me initially was, having been in the military all those years, I consider non-public very much like confidential or classified information. And trust me, you don't see that put out over Zoom. The other things that concern me, not that I have concerns with our local people here, but it's somebody that's not a member of the Board of Aldermen that puts out the Zoom information. Not only does that person have that information, but so do the people in the TV area. Even though they're not going to be on, they still have that information and could get in. And Zoom is a third-party provider, and they monitor because when they have something going on Zoom that is not right, they cut it off. So they're monitoring. So they don't have access to this. So non-publics are usually something that's extremely sensitive and should not be subject to anyone outside of the members of this board. Zoom's not secure. I'm sorry, but it's not. So I don't know how you get around that, but if we're talking about city non-public information, and that particular instance was probably not as secure as some, but if you open it up to all times, it could be somebody involved in years past on Board of Aldermen, they get thrown in jail. And so they're very sensitive things that come up in non-public. So I'm supporting, I didn't support this originally, but I am supporting it unless we can if we could find, again, I don't have any problem with anybody in this chamber, but unless we can find a more secure way of doing it than Zoom, because I don't consider Zoom secure. And I don't consider somebody outside of this board setting up the access to Zoom that has that information, even though we trust them implicitly, it's not the way it works. So, my 2 cents.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. And I want to echo a lot of what everybody said here. It's not a trust issue. It really isn't. It's a security issue. And I chaired the last one. But before I say that, I'm going to tell you also that I have had to miss public sessions because I wasn't here long before Zoom, long before COVID. And then you go to the city clerk's office and you sit there and you listen and you read anything any documents that have been given out. And at that point, I was allowed to sign out a document and I had to bring it back within 48 hours. So there is a system in place for that. That particular case, I believe there was a vote, and yes, I did not get to vote on it. But I chaired that last one, and I will tell you, there was a lot of anxiety. And that was because our people that video this and do that and so on, it had to be, in order for you to come in, it had to be on their screen. They had to leave it, and we had to hope that we did not lose that and we didn't have anything like this. This is truly a security issue. It wasn't just someone gave out the Zoom or can we trust Zoom. We had another party that had to have it, and I couldn't secure that. I trusted them implicitly that they told me that they walked away. And at first they couldn't walk away because they had to make sure everything was okay. So it was like, we'll turn the volume down. And I trust that they did all of that, but it was concern and it was anxiety. I did not put my name on this, but I do support this because of that particular reason. We have other mechanisms prior to COVID, prior to the bringing in Zoom, we had another mechanism. It was basically, we were in, I don't want to call this the cone of silence so much, but it was. We locked the doors, it was just the people here. I don't know if someone puts their ear to the door, can they hear what we're saying? I have no idea, I'm assuming that they're not doing that. But this was a real issue that we had when the GTV people had to run out of the room, turn the volume down so no one could hear it, and they really couldn't end the meeting. I mean, I know they cut us off from the TV and so on, but we don't have any other way. I worked with Jeff, I worked with the people that were here, and until we have a fix for that, I don't think we should be doing this. And this does not exclude anybody who's been sick. I know Alderman Dowd, I know Chairwoman Kelly, and I know each of us at some point have either not been able to be here for whatever reason. In the past, that happened too. And I'm sure that anybody who's been here on the board has missed a non-public session at some point. But until we can have the security that Zoom isn't listening in, that GTV doesn't have to be the party that is manipulating it so that we can all log in, I think it would be reckless for us to not vote this in. And I do want to make some other comments, if I may, Madam Chairwoman. And that is, truthfully, I'm not in favor of even someone who's going to be talking to us coming on Zoom. I don't think that should be happening. If it's that important, they need to be here. Whether we have to pay for them to be here or not, something of a non-public session is very, very sensitive. And I think we need to have them here in the room so we can ask questions, not trying to hope the connection is okay and so on. Something of non-public session is extraordinarily important. And the last one was and I did have anxiety that I knew this was playing in another room, hoping that no one was there. I even went and double-checked to make sure that no one was there. But I do trust the people I work with and that I have worked with. But I think we're reckless if we allow Zooming during a non-public session, something that sensitive. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as written, I don't support this. I was one of the aldermen who Zoomed into the last one. I was away on business. I was in Chicago, and I wasn't even told that we were going to have a non-public until a couple hours beforehand when Alderman Klee called me to make sure that I was going to be available. So there wasn't any time to make any alternate accommodations. And, I would have not appreciated being excluded from that just because of geography. The NROs, the ordinances that we have say that no alderman will be excluded from a non-public session, and I know that this would preclude that, but I feel like I was elected to participate in all of the discussions, not just some of them. And if I'm sick or if I have to travel for business, I feel like I should be allowed to participate. Some of the information that's been said about this tonight is very interesting. I'm not overly concerned with the link getting out. I mean, you can see when people join, so even if I went and emailed the link to all of everybody on my mailing list and said, hey, we're having a non-public tonight, everybody join in, you'll see them join. So I'm not concerned about that. I'm not concerned with the TV people because like the people in this horseshoe, I trust them, and if we tell them you can't watch this, I trust that they're gonna listen and they're gonna step out of the room. The only thing that I give a little credence to, and it's something I hadn't thought of, is the people at Zoom. If there's monitoring of our meetings, I wasn't aware that that was happening. It's certainly worth looking into. And I'm glad to hear so many of us speak tonight about how it's not a trust issue for people in this room. I will definitely say that 6 weeks ago, I felt like that was the case. There were comments made about how do I know what he's doing? I can't see what's going on there, and that definitely sounds like a trust issue. So I'm glad to hear tonight that that's not the case. But that being said, I was against getting rid of Zoom for the public, and I'm against this because I feel like the more ways we have to participate in the process, the better and more efficiently it'll work. And I just don't believe that there really is a security issue with Zoom. I think that all of us here, can operate it safely, and I don't see that this solves anything. We haven't had anything come up. We haven't had a security violation or anything, so this is my favorite phrase that you guys laugh when I say is a solution looking for a problem. We haven't had any security breaches, so I don't see the need for this ordinance at this time.
Alderman Sullivan, I
Thank
believe
you.
you were next.
Yeah, I echo that a little bit. I think when you look at the non-public sessions that we've had this year, I think that was only our second one. We had one back in January during the regular Board of Aldermen when I first got on here. And then this was the second one. It was originally slated as a committee meeting, if I remember. And then it was a quick kind of paste everything together. We need everybody here for a non-public session. So to me, it seems like it fits a very narrow niche. All due respect to Alderman Dowd, I mean, I live my life on Zoom. It's a very secure platform. I would like to see maybe a password protection that can go out in that email. You can do that, and as host of a Zoom meeting, you can set the host function so you can only let in certain people. There's a lot of functionality on the platform that you can do to allay any security concerns. So I wouldn't be in favor of this. I think it gives people access. I would be in favor, however, for maybe, you rewrite the ordinance where you have to say you have to announce it to the Board of Aldermen 7 days in advance to give people a chance to get there, and maybe only non-public sessions can only be held during a regular Board of Aldermen meeting other than emergency circumstances. So other than that, I wouldn't be for it.
Alderman Lopez, then Alderman Collins.
So I entered this discussion much more in favor of the ordinance than I am now. I think a good point has been made about the Harry Potter level rearranging and rescheduling and everything, where we need to be very conscious of that. And if we're going to make decisions in a non-public meeting and there are members of the board that were elected to be present and there wasn't time for them to come back from Chicago or whatever, I don't think they should be excluded because of distance. I do think that we need to monitor Zoom, and that has been an issue that's been brought up by city staff as well, but we aren't talking about a regular usage of it. I think in hindsight, my own suggestion about, wait, didn't we used to do like you could call in? Zoom makes more sense than doing it over the phone because you can turn the camera on and you can see the person. So it'd probably be much more amenable to an ordinance requiring that anybody using Zoom has to be visible at all times. I cannot get behind concerns about whether our telecommunications staff are trustworthy or not, because essentially we just take it as gospel that they're turning the camera on and off at any point anyway. So if you want to go down that rabbit hole, you've probably already lost. They routinely prove themselves to be trustworthy and discreet. And I think we should probably continue to encourage that. Now, where a member of the public claimed that aldermen were texting her and all this kind of stuff, I don't know how to verify that. Honestly, the individual speaking may have understood that to be the truth, may have felt that they were an essential part. I've noticed that person sort of refers to them as tasked or assigned things that I don't think anybody has formally requested. So that may have been a little bit of hyperbole, and I don't think it's a justification for ordinances. But be that as it may, I think the example was actually given with regards to a public meeting. So if people are texting hot tips to people or get down here's or whatever, that's a different problem, and we need to work on that, not necessarily shut down the remote access type of things. And then finally, I would point out that the non-public meetings we have should generally be under very specific criteria, but they are not always life or death. Sometimes they are city staff members coming to us with an opportunity that if we told the public about it, then suddenly that opportunity would not be as good. Like maybe some people would have an idea of our intentions or how much money could be exchanged or that type of things. Not necessarily more dire consequences, and certainly not like probably the much more sensitive things that Alderman Dowd deals with at BAE. So I think a meeting like that, we shouldn't ban other aldermen who happen to be away when it was coming up from attending because we're not willing to provide that long distance communication tool. I think Zoom is an important aspect of public engagement, particularly in this case because it allows us to be able to see and respond in real time with members of the board and lets them fulfill their obligation that is expected by voters, even if they didn't necessarily plan the same schedule that ultimately was given to us, as needs arose. So at the moment, I'm not inclined to vote for it out of this committee, so I would want to explore whether tabling it or amending it would be an option.
Is that a motion, Alderman Lopez?
No, I would just want to explore either to Alderman Tebow or Clemens if they could see a way to modify it.
Okay. Alderman Clemens?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My issue with this remains the security, and I can't believe I'm doing this, but we've all heard the expression, there are unknown unknowns, and that's true out there, right? So we can think that our emails are secure. So when we send the link, no, it's only going to the people who we say it's going to. We can say that, no one can hack into that. We can think that no one can hack into the Zoom without being detected. We can think a lot of these different things. But the fact is we don't know. And the fact is that just because it hasn't happened doesn't mean that somebody isn't going to try. The difference is, I guess, is that if somebody's standing at the door with a glass listening in, there's a good chance we're probably gonna know, or we'll find out about it, versus somebody on the other side of a computer hacking into whatever to find out. Now, I don't know, we don't do things here in this chamber, generally speaking, that are of that high level interest. However, that's not to say that somebody wouldn't try it or that somebody wouldn't do it. And so for me, it comes back to, if we can find a way that we could do this in a secure way that our IT department would sign off on, that could say, we're 95% protected. Obviously, nothing's going to be 100%. But we're fairly certain that unless you have a serious hacker, right, who's gonna get through, this is the only way that they're gonna do it. Or, I don't know, but I'm just not comfortable with doing this right now because I don't think that exists. I could be wrong, but I think our best bet is to continue to do, or to go back to doing the non-public sessions entirely in person. The other thing I want to say about that is that, I understand traveling. Trust me, I get it. I work in Lexington, Mass. I used to work in Cambridge, Mass. It was one of the reasons why I didn't run for re-election in 2018. So I get it. It's a time commitment here. But when you have a non-public session, it comes up, generally speaking, because there is something that has to be addressed that is important in nature and needs to have a resolution, and it needs to be done in a timely manner. We don't always have 7 days or whatever it is to plan for those things. We don't always have the luxury of being able to contact every alderman and make sure that they're able to come. And in particular with the Finance Committee, that committee deals with lawsuits and things like that come up. And that committee, separate from the Board of Aldermen, has to make decisions sometimes on a quarterly basis, if not more. In the past, I can remember a time when there was one every month. And then when we were buying Penachuk, every meeting was a non-public meeting, of the Penachuk Special Committee. So my point is that there are things that come up, and, you know, our schedules are our schedules, we all wanna be there. I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure that we're here in person when we can. I don't think it's a slight on somebody if something comes up and, you know, hey, it's a non-public session that, you know, has to happen on this evening. You know, if you're here, you're here, if you're not, you're not. It's not a slight on you for not being here or not being able to participate. It's just the fact that this is a non-public thing, it's a security issue. And it has nothing to do with you as an individual alderman. It has to do with the fact that the email is going out into cyberspace and somebody might be able to hack it in and get the link. And who knows, we don't have somebody that sits there and monitors it either. We don't have somebody that took our oath of office to sit there and monitor it. So that's where I come from with this. It has nothing to do with any of you people or anybody that I've served with or will serve with or anything like that. It has to do with security and what is in the best interest of, in my opinion, this city. Thank you.
Alderman Tebow.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Alderman Lopez said a ban. We're not trying to ban any aldermen. I would hope everybody would be able to be there every time. If you can't, you can't. It could be me. I could be traveling. I could be sick. Alderman Camo can't tell me he's been to every single meeting that he's supposed to be at. It's just whether he wants to or not. And so who says the non-public would open up for him that night too? He could be away that time too. You never know. And so again, he brought up the divisiveness of this issue. I didn't. I said it doesn't mean to be divisive. You know, I wanted to, if we're all looking at each other in the face, right? Why should we allow people on Zoom to have their cameras off? Right? Alderman Sullivan had his on the whole time. Why can't we see them? What's the problem with seeing somebody's face and being able to converse with them face to face? I don't get why that was me being divisive. Shoshana was off as well. Alderwoman Kelly had hers off as well. So it's not trying to go after anybody in particular. I just believe if we're going to be on Zoom, we need to see the person that we're talking to and the person that's involved in the meeting. Because if we were all in the same room, that's what we would see. I wouldn't be hiding behind a chair so you didn't see me, right? Or putting my head down. So I don't know why that's a divisive issue. If Alderman Camo thinks that it's a divisive issue, that's on him, right? And I agree with Alderman Clemens exactly. You don't have to see someone log in to have somebody hack something. You know, yes, we haven't had a breach yet, Alderman Camo. We haven't had a breach yet. But every company that's had a breach said the same thing until they had a breach. And then they had a lot of problems after that. So I don't know why we wouldn't be safety conscious and less risky for the citizens of Nashua. I don't know why this is a divisive issue. I really don't. I don't see what the problem is. Anybody can miss a meeting at any time due to whatever circumstances. We all try to be here every single time. So I don't know why that's an issue that we're, you know, afraid. Now, I'll agree with Alderman Camo. 2 hours, that's not acceptable in my opinion. Now, if something just comes up, what are you going to do, I guess? But I think we should have been able to all know earlier. So I agree with that, 100%. And no one should be left out of that. But no one's trying to ban anyone because I can't guarantee who's going to miss something in the future. It could be any one of us. Whether I like you or not, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Anybody could miss it. So it's not trying to go after any aldermen or women. It's trying to be more safe to the city and be less risky. And I don't see why that's a problem. And sometimes we don't even vote. It's just information given to us that we need to have, which again, to Alderman Clee's point, you can get afterwards. And sometimes maybe it is a vote. I don't know. That's the only two I've been to this year. So again, I'm not trying, it's not a divisive issue.
So I'm not one to shut down debate. We're closing in on 3 hours and we still have two employees of the city who are waiting for additional ordinances. So I will ask that any comments from here on out are new comments and not same comments reiterated.
Yes.
Alderman Dowd.
We're talking about city-sensitive information, so I think that either at this committee or at the full board, if you pass it tonight, that we should get the Corporation Council involved before anything is finalized. Because The information we're talking about goes well beyond this chamber.
Alderman Clee.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I apologize if I appear to be reiterating something, but I'm not. The last non-public session, while it was last minute, there was no time for it, okay? At the last minute, I was thrown in as being chair of that meeting, and the truth is, the meeting was for the Finance Committee. It was courtesy, and I appreciate that they did it, to let every Board of Aldermen member know, but it was specifically for the Finance Committee. And as Alderman Camo said, I called him because he was a member of the Finance Committee. I didn't call all the other Board of Aldermen members. So I wanted to make sure that he was aware of this. And so we went from there, and I did know he was out of town. They did not allow telephone calls during non-public session. So this is not like taking the place of public. So I want to clarify that. And I can tell you that because the one that I said I could not make, I was not allowed to call into that one. I was basically secured off and so on. So this is not for anything like that. I have to say, and this I am probably reiterating, trust is one thing, and I think we really do all trust each other, but do we want to take any chance of any risk that something so sensitive that it has to be non-public, even a chance that it could get out, or even the thought process that the public would think that we're taking any chances with this, with something that's so sensitive. So I don't get a vote tonight, but I would hope that you would at least allow this to go to the full board because this is something important. So even if you just were to pass it on, to allow the full board to have complete input and discussion on that. I would like to see that happen and not for it to die here. Thank you.
All set?
Yes, thank you.
Alderman Lopez.
I would like to make a motion to amend the ordinance as presented by striking the phrase under section D of 5.5 where it says aldermanic board meetings, aldermanic standing, and special committees. So that they would instead read, with respect to finance committee meetings, all participants in a non-public session must be present at the non-public session in person, and then continues unamended.
Motion is to amend. Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah, I just have a clarifying question. So can you read what would it essentially do, your amendment?
It restricts the ordinance being presented specifically to the finance committee.
Can't do it.
So,
Alderman Clemmons.
so I'm not gonna support that, and the reason is for the same reason. If you have a security issue that you're concerned about at the finance committee, it's going to be the same security issue that takes place at a special board of aldermen meeting or a regular alderman meeting. So restricting this to the finance committee, that you have to be in person, but not another board meeting, doesn't address in my opinion, the issue. So I won't support the amendment.
Any additional comments on the amendment?
Before I comment, I would be interested in Alderman Dowd's reference that this can't be done.
Alderman Dowd.
I believe the way the ordinance is written on, and I don't think it relates to this ordinance, unless it's mentioned in the ordinance. You have to be able to discuss non-public in the committee or full board level that it impacted by. If you limit it to finance, I'm sure Corporation Counsel is going to say, no, you can't do that. So again, if you're going to have discussion on this, I think you need the Corporation Counsel involved because you're talking about things that changes that going to tie the city's hands, and I don't think legal's going to allow that.
If I can comment.
Alderman Lopez.
So as the ordinance is written, it adds the prohibition that you have to meet in person and basically says none of these meetings can be done via electronic means. So if you restrict that to finance committee, it doesn't have any effect on non-public meetings in aldermanic at the full board level or any special committees or in other committees. But it does mean that if you're having a finance committee meeting in which a non-public session is required, everybody has on the finance committee has to be there in person, and anybody attending that meeting who may not be a committee member but is a board member also has to be there in person. So in my opinion, this addresses the concerns that were raised that Finance Committee may need to do sudden changes to contracts or personnel issues or expenditures that may happen quickly, but it also respects the access that has been expressed by other board members here with regards to full board meetings where we may have a non-public meeting, which may not be so time sensitive, crucial, or deeply impactful. It may just be something that if we were to express it, it could put the city in an unfavorable position bargaining wise. So in those circumstances, it doesn't necessarily need the same immediate level of security. And I would remind members of the committee that the claims of security breaches is a claim. It is, in order to prove that it's impossible, you'd have to prove a negative because it's not something that's actually happened yet. So as there are no examples of actually having security breaches, it's impossible to argue the opposite. It's entirely possible that someone could have left their phone in the chamber on record and we never bothered to look for it. You can find surveillance devices that are this big and you can put them wherever. Since we're not checking under every single chair and behind every single curtain, I think the assumption is probably that that's not happening.
Alderman Clevens.
Yeah, the only thing I'm gonna say is, first of all, to address what Alderman Dowd said, this amendment is in order because we could do it. I don't think we should do it. That's my opinion, because I don't think we should have two different standards for different meetings. That said, the other thing is again, if it's a non-public session, the level of security is the same. It doesn't matter what the topic is. If you're going into non-public, it meets a threshold that it cannot be disclosed to the public until the Board of Aldermen, or in the case of the Finance Committee, unseals the minutes. So if we're going into non-public, it's non-public, period, end of story. It doesn't matter. There's no levels of what is more important or less important. Maybe in our own opinions there are, but as far as the law is concerned, there is not.
Okay. The motion is to amend. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
The nays have it. We are back to the original recommendation for final passage of our O-22-028. Alderman Covea.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I'll just ask the members of the committee here, is there any flavor to table this tonight? I just feel like there is something that can be done and we could amend it to make this more favorable if we were to table and then ask Corporation Counsel and maybe IT to attend the next meeting, and we can hash out the fine points so it doesn't have to happen with the full Board of Aldermen.
Took the words right out of my mouth. Alderman Covea, is that a motion?
Yes.
All right, the motion is to table. It is not debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Okay, that motion carries and that will be on the table.
Just a point of reference, if I could, at the next meeting, you will invite Corporation Counsel and IT to discuss it. Thank you.
Yes, I'll make sure that happens. Okay, we are moving on to O-22-030. I see that CFO Griffin has joined us in the chamber probably about 2 hours ago. Thank you for your patience. Come join us.
Just go right to work.
We need a motion.
Yeah. O-22-030, I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage, increasing the elderly tax exemptions.
All right, my recommendation is for final passage. CFO Griffin, I assume you want to speak on the memo we received?
Yes, I could, Madam Chairwoman. John Griffin, CFO, Treasurer, Tax Collector. Before I start, does everybody have a copy of the two exhibits that support the fiscal notes of this one and the next one? Okay.
Yes.
So what I'm going to discuss, if I could, Madam Chairwoman, is how this was calculated.
Please do. Thank you.
As a non-assessor. I asked him if he was going to join us, and he said no, so I'm on my own. You haven't approved him yet. or nominate. So how this was done is, the assessing department provided me the 2022 information, which essentially is the 3 categories of exemption with the current exemption amounts and the number of the residents that are receiving the exemptions. So if you take the second column times the third column, you get the exemption total, which for this city is 164 million. Then using the resolution that suggests or would like to have the exemption amounts increased for each of the categories, you get the, in fiscal 2023, this has no impact on this year's taxes. So you take the same amounts, multiply them by the new values, and you get some increases. So for each of those 3 categories, we have the increase in the exempted amount. We tax on a per thousand basis, so you divide those numbers by 1,000, you get the per thousand, and then assuming a tax rate of 1830 for lack of any other tax rate, you get what's referred to as lost revenue. It's a concept that somebody came up with, but essentially it's lost revenue until we spread it over the rest of the people that are paying taxes. It would have a, I believe I did the numbers, it's 3 cents on the tax rate. So the 1830 would go up by 3 cents. We did this a few years ago. This isn't new, but it was calculated the same way. The high-level assumptions are we'd have the same people qualifying next year as we had this year, which is kind of the only way you can do it. You do lose some residents due to death and other things or moving out, but from a ballpark perspective, 414,000 is reasonable. And then fiscal '24, same analysis, that's an add. So that 505,000 would be in addition to what we're providing fiscal '24. So with that, if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you.
I actually had a question. I didn't see anyone's hand, so I'm gonna go first this time. So I think this makes sense. I obviously have signed on. I think this makes a lot of sense. I don't know that you're gonna be able to answer my question, but my wonder is around the new assessments and whether these numbers will change based on the fact that some people may have finally, like, their assessment changed. Would we have more people in these buckets than we normally would?
Very good question. A lot of things change between now and even beyond this tax year, next tax year. The residences are gonna know what their new values are. And some may have not applied for an exemption in the past, they might do it. So you're gonna have that ebb and flow. What I did is, and worked with the assessing department, is just take these numbers as what the ordinance calls for, and didn't question why was it going up this amount for each, why, we didn't get into that. We might have done a little of that the last time in 2018, but there was no attempt that I know of to match, like, to make sure a person didn't get a tax bill. They got one this year, or they didn't get one this year, and they might get one, well, they're gonna get one this year, but next year, I don't think there was an attempt to match the increases, because as we all know, the increases within the groupings are significantly different.
Okay, thank you.
Not sure if that answers your question, but it's
No,
very
it does.
difficult.
I know it's probably not really something that we can forecast necessarily, but I do have concern knowing that we just did a full measure list, so just
Okay.
wondering if that would change. Before we go to the committee, I know this is your piece of legislation, Alderman Sullivan, did you want to speak on it?
Yeah, actually, it was myself, Alderman Govea, and Alderman Camo.
Went from the top.
It's kind of a team effort. It just real simple, and thanks. Assessments went up. I looked at that. I said, well, you know, we should raise the exemptions accordingly. When I went back and forth with CFO Griffin, we arrived at the 3 cents. I applied that to my tax rate, and it was $13.17 over a year. So that to me seemed, because as you all know, I have been like a dog with a bone on the tax rate. And I saw that and I said, okay, that's, I think that's a fair burden for some folks to bear. So it's really, I think, pretty cut and dry.
Thank you, Alderman Sullivan. Questions from the committee? I saw no hands and then I saw all the hands. What's going on, people? Alderman Gouveia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll speak on it briefly. We worked pretty tirelessly on trying to figure out what numbers made sense here. We bounced around a lot of numbers. It's pretty cut and dry what we want to do. I believe it's fair. I hope everybody else feels the same. Thanks.
Alderman Kamau.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The only other thing I wanted to add, more of a statement, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Griffin, but the adding the 3 cents to the tax rate, that assumes that spending stays the same. If the budget for 23 goes down by $413,000, then there would be no effect on the tax rate, is that correct?
That, Madam Chairwoman, if I may, that could definitely happen.
Okay.
The 3 cents is more of an 1830 bogey, and then, if you cut spending significantly, it does help the tax rate.
Great. Alderman
If I
Kamau,
could
do you
just
have a
follow up, thank you. Yes, so a couple of people had reached out to me since this was introduced and asked how we were planning on paying for this. And I guess the two options are spreading it out, as we've discussed, or you looking for some savings in future years, which would be obviously my preference, but if we can't, we kind of agree that it's a small enough burden spread out over the rest of the city that it helps some of the more vulnerable people in the city that might necessarily be on a fixed income and things like that, without overbearing the rest of the taxpayers. Thank you.
Alderman Clemmons.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I definitely am in support of this. I was happy to sign on as a co-sponsor, and I want to thank the 3 aldermen who came up with this. But to the previous speaker's comments, unfortunately, I mean, even if we wanted to cut spending, costs go up, and that's the problem. So we could cut spending, right? But salaries go up. People's salaries go up. We have to buy things. It's a nice thought, but
I just said if.
Right. I just am, being realistic to the taxpayer, I think is our most important job, in my opinion. And I think the way that Alderman Sullivan approached it by saying, when he looked at his taxes, doing this, it's going to raise his taxes $13 approximately, and I think that's an honest way to look at it, because in reality here, yes, we're going to try to do everything we can to make sure that we're spending every dollar as wisely and as we can, and we do that every year, and we have disagreements on what that is and what that looks like and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I think the reality of it is we're going to spend more than we did last year. So I really appreciate the fact and the straightforward candor from Alderman Sullivan that, it is what it is. But our seniors have lived in this city. They've raised children, supposedly they've raised children in this city. They've paid their tax burden over the years. And this is our way of giving back to them and recognizing the fact that a lot of them are on fixed incomes and inflation has been high this year, which is out of all of our hands. And, this is a way to give back to that group of people and appreciate everything that they've done for the city and their service to the city, and just by being residents. So I definitely support this. I think it's a good idea, and we will find a way. We'll find a way to pay for this. We'll find a way to get it into the budget. We always do, and I don't think it has to necessarily come at the expense of services or things like that. So I fully support this.
Okay, Alderman Lopez, please.
If our most fiscally conservative board members are in favor of a socially progressive redistribution of tax burden, then who am I to stand in their way? I've always felt the two concepts are not mutually exclusive. I feel like we'll probably collect more taxes from an individual who's able to hold on to their house for the next 5 years versus somebody who's not. So I think recognizing that there's been massive spikes in utility costs and in tax assessments, burdens, and that we've come through some pretty unique and challenging years, particularly for elderly populations, is just strategically wise. And looking at this as an aspect of asset retention, ensuring that the citizens who have consistently demonstrated commitment to Nashua by living here, made their homes here, and contributed not only over time, but likely could contribute more if they weren't trying to figure out where to relocate to. I think it just makes good sense. If we're gonna get out of these crisis days and these circumstances, then we need to recognize what people's strengths are. And with the elderly, I think their strengths are in experience, not necessarily in earning power.
Great. Alderman Dow?
Yeah, I support this. I think it's a good idea. And especially under the concept that we're going to ask the people, younger people, people with more means to help out the elderly by paying a little extra. You know, I had to put an extra $20 on my taxes, so be it, no problem. The only thing I would be concerned as chairman of budget if we try chopping this number out of next year's budget arbitrarily. So as long as we're under the understanding that this is an added cost to whatever we come up with next year for required city spending, fine.
All set, Alderman Dow?
Yep.
All right, all set?
No.
Alderman Clegg?
Thank you, Madam President. I too am for this, and I know everything I'm about to say is going to sound like I'm not, but I would be remiss if I didn't point out facts that have been brought to me from my constituents. One is I have a constituent who said to me, why do I have to pay for police, for fire, etc.? I've never called the police, I've never had a fire. And I always say to them, just in case, consider it an insurance policy. Well, having said that, I need to remind all of us that in 2022, we had 164 people that paid zero taxes because of this exemption. It's estimated in 2023 we'll have 216, and in 2024 there'll be 335 that are not contributing towards that. Now, I agree with this $13 is not a big thing, and that's not a big shift of a burden. But we do need to keep this in mind every time we do an exemption or credit that we are shifting the burden. So I tend to be the devil's advocate, and I think that it's something that's very important. And to Alderman Dowd's comment, I know a lot of younger families that aren't of the same means as someone who might qualify for this. They may have the same income and so on, but they don't qualify because they don't have the age. So I don't want to say that this is all about that. I think that we have, our tax rate went up less than 4%. Obviously, we would all like to have seen it come down even more, but inflation went up over 8%. So I think we're kind of staying within it. I think we do need to do everything we can to help everybody stay within their home and so on. But again, this is a shift that will just keep growing and growing. And as you can see, based on the guesstimate of 164, 216, and 335 residents that aren't paying a penny of tax. I had one constituent who said to me, could we at least have them do a nominal? You know, they have to pay $200 a year. And truthfully, I don't know if that would be legal. I'd have to go back and look at all the RSA and so on. So again, I'm not against this. I just would be remiss if I didn't bring these points up and discuss this. And as I'm not a voting member on this, I will stop talking now. Thank you.
CFO Griffin, My understanding of this is that this is something that we periodically do based on home prices. Is that the case? This isn't something new, something suddenly brought forward?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, that is true. We did it in 2018, didn't have to do it in 2013 with homes losing value, and 2008, we didn't have to do that. But I will say that, I don't know if this is good or bad, but in 2018, we pointed out that the city of Nashua really has an extremely generous, by magnitudes, of exemption amounts. You wouldn't see this in Manchester, Concord. I used to keep track of the data. I wasn't able to put my hands on it, but these are significant amounts, and I think maybe we really take care of our elderly and folks like that. But I'd be remiss if I didn't tell you that these numbers are good for folks that need the help.
I would be interested in seeing what, not that it changes my support for this, but I would be interested in knowing what the other cities are doing. I know you said you couldn't put your hands on it, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened after 2018, but you heard tonight that literally the whole assessing department is, for the most part, has been transitioned, so it's something we can work on. I could probably look up Concord, Manchester, and Portsmouth, but they're not as generous. They haven't done, with their evaluations, they haven't kept pace. That's what we've done, not only 23, 18, but probably back in the early 2000s. Thank you.
Thank you again. And I do want to add to that. I have gone on the DRA website, and for all the exemptions, for all the credits, no one beats Nashua under any circumstances, and you can get that information right on the DRA under the municipality. And I have analyzed all of those particular things. I know people will say, well, we don't do enough for here. That, trust me, go and look at it and do a comparison. It's right on the DRA website. It's under municipality. If you just Google New Hampshire tax exemptions, it'll bring you right to that page. You can download it by Excel, PDF. You can break it out by every single credit. And when it comes to the next subject, I will bring that up. One concern that I had written a note and I forgot to mention is, and I'm glad that Mr. Griffin brought this up. One of the things is he said that we didn't have to do it in a particular year because we lost value. We lost value, but we didn't lower the exemption. Right now, I did speak to 2 real estate agents and they said that we are basically about 5% down in value, housing market wise. If this crashes or something, we're not going to lower this. So we have to keep this in mind, that this is good for today and it may be good for next year, but if the housing market does regulate and does go down, that 164 and 216 and 335 that I mentioned, that number is going to go up because more and more people will qualify for paying zero. So just keep that in mind as the value. I have never seen us lower the exemption, and to that I'm going to ask you, have you ever seen us lower the exemption even if the values of homes went down?
Madam Chairwoman, I haven't been around here long enough to know, but our esteemed treasurer Fredette basically has indicated to me that he's never seen it go down, and he's been here for 6 decades at this point. Thank you.
Not talking, he was 5 years old when he started.
This is just with a quick Google search, it looks like Manchester is 156, 210, and then 280, which is, we'll have to verify that, but it's kind of interesting. Is there any way to mitigate the potential of this ballooning, doubling, tripling, because more people qualify or more people, is there any mechanism that we've ever seen or used?
Once these numbers, as Alderwoman Clee indicated, that if there is a moderating of the real estate such that more people qualify to not pay tax, or are you saying?
And the overall tax burden.
It does ebb and flow. I mean, my remembrance of 88, bought a house for X. By 92, after the Massachusetts miracle, it was worth 20% less. Need to refinance to get a lower rate, borrowed money from my dad. I mean, it's just, it happens. This time around, everything's going up. The fact is that the commercial properties didn't go up as much as the residential. If residential goes up 40 and commercial goes up 13, you really can't mitigate with the shift of the burden, because the tax laws are single tax rate based on assessment with the availability of exemptions and credits.
Thank you.
So those are the things you can do.
Alderman Govea?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I don't think I would ever advocate in a situation to decrease the amount. If that's the hill I die on, is the elderly exemption and then the next exemption, which is the veterans exemption, so be it. I'm fine with that.
Alderman Lopez, then Alderman Clements.
To CFO Griffin and Treasurer Tax Collector, is there a way to address the shifting burden of tax that's where commercial properties that haven't necessarily appreciated in value over time because there's nobody developing them, or they're starting to become stagnant, maybe lose their evident value, and then the total piece of the pie that falls onto the average citizen seems to get a little bit larger? Is there a way to create a tax structure for saying, okay, you're not developing your commercial property, and that's starting to create an artificial depreciation, but we know what you're doing?
It's a good question. I'm not knowledgeable enough in assessing to know what the choices are. I know on the commercial side, you have more than one choice. You have income, building, rents, things like that. I've asked Treasurer Fedette this in the past. You folks have never been able to pass what's called classification, which could, up to maybe 175% of residential value, could have a dual tax rate. But I don't think that's gone anywhere. I think people might have tried it, but it hasn't gone anywhere. So you have the single tax rate, and then you have the workmanship and the knowledge of the assessing group to figure out how to properly value. And furthermore, you have folks at the commercial level filing appeals. So that's where there's differences that could come out of that. But there isn't any mechanism where you could allocate more costs over here or over there. You have a single tax rate.
Okay, well, I would just be interested in making sure that, well, we're talking about the balance between elderly and younger taxpayers, and as far as I know, there's no way to keep yourself from getting older. We could also look at the balance between commercial properties and privately owned properties, and there's a lot more choices when you're a commercial property owner than there are when you're an individual property owner. You can't leave your house and move to a cheaper one just on a whim. That costs us as much as anything else. Whereas somebody could say, you know what, we're not gonna have any tenants in this storefront, and we're just gonna let it ride for tax purposes.
I mean, that happens as a matter of business decisions. Sometimes you go by a building that's been vacant for, years and years and years, and somebody owns it, but they haven't done anything with it, so.
If we can charge per cobweb or something like that, that would be interesting.
Other comments? All set? Okay. The motion is to recommend final passage. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
O-22-031, increasing the veterans optional and all veterans tax credits. I'd like to make a motion to recommend final passage, and being my motion, I'd like to speak to it.
Speak to it.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay.
I was waiting for you.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So, like the elderly, one of the populations that hasn't really been taken care of over the years is veterans. They go, they serve our country, and then come back, and not all of them, get back on their feet. A constituent came to me and actually said, can we make the veterans optional tax credit like $1,500? And so I wrote a bill for that, or I sent a bill to legal to write, and they said, no, the state only goes $750. So there's a cap at $750, so that's why I went up $250 on it. And I know CFO Griffin supplied us with some paperwork on it. Again, to Alderman Sullivan's point too, we haven't been able to find ways to help portions of our population, and so, whatever ways we can to help during this I guess crisis, and it could get worse, it sounds like, is to try to find ways to help different pieces of our population that need it the most. So that's what I got.
Alderman Kelly?
Alderman Dowd?
Yes. I'm going to leave because I'm going to have to abstain from voting on this at any of the level because I'm one of the people who would benefit from it, being a veteran, so.
You can't vote.
You're leaving?
What?
Did you say you're going to leave?
I'm leaving, yes,
Okay.
the meeting. What do
Okay.
you mean I can't?
Well, not for,
You're leaving the board?
not on the committee.
Leaving the meeting.
Have a lovely evening, Alderman Dowd. Okay.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service, yes. Comments?
I don't mind if you pass it.
Anyone from the committee?
Could I,
oh,
Alderwoman
yeah.
Kelly, just wanted
Please.
to point out.
Yes, your memo, please.
Right, I inadvertently calculated the area of veterans credits to include the DVF, which is service-connected total disability. That, we provide 2,000, we could provide another 2,000. But taking that out in the absolute directive that Alderman Tebow and Dory Clark worked, Corporation Counsel Clark, I brought it down to the 593 that you see. That would be the impact of the increase.
So just to
593,000.
clarify, we did not go up to the highest amount on the disability tax credit
Correct.
to keep it at this increase of 593.
Just a 250 on the first two items
Okay.
that provides 593,000 of increase,
Okay,
assuming everybody's still eligible and all of that.
okay.
Thank you.
Did you happen to do the tax-free calculation on this guy?
Well, it's slightly more than the 414,000, so I think it's probably 4 cents.
Great. Thank you. Alderman Clemmons?
3.5.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and thank you to Mr. Griffin for this and analysis. Again, so when you take the last one, as Alderman Sullivan had stated earlier, it's about $13, maybe $14 on your taxes. This one's gonna be a little bit more. So these two combined are gonna shift the tax burden over to individuals, well, let's see, by about $28, $27 next year. But as with the senior tax credit, the veterans tax credit is important as well. We've done a lot in Nashua to help veterans, and I've had have had a proud voting record on a number of things that have helped them, including this tax credit in the past. And I think this is great legislation. We're going forward, giving them the max. We want to make Nashua a place where veterans, when they are done serving our country, and they're off in different areas, different bases overseas, they want to come home to Nashua, and we want to make it a welcoming place for them to come home and to continue to raise their families and to settle their roots here. And so I think this is a wonderful way to do that. It honors their service, and I'm in full support of it. I despite the increase in the tax rate.
I'll set Alderman Clemmons.
Yeah.
Alderman Govea.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm also in agreement of this, a lot of the same reasons. We got to protect those who have protected us. And whether that be our veterans or the elderly who helped raise us, it all goes hand in hand, and I think a big benefit that the city has is we do take care of our veterans, we do take care of our elderly, and going through the numbers tonight, it shows that, clearly shows that we take care of our elderly and veterans. So this is another good piece of legislation. I'll support it.
Great. Alderman Camo?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I also will support this. I was glad to sign on. My grandfather landed at Normandy. My father served in Vietnam. I protected the great state of Georgia. Nobody's comparing those three, but I'm happy to do anything to help support our veterans. If it was up to me, they'd never pay a dime of taxes again. If you're willing to die for us, you know, that's good enough for me. But this is a great step. I'm glad to see this happen. I hope that everyone supports it.
Alderman Clee?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm going to be the ugly fly in the ointment. I worked for the Department of Veterans Affairs for 25 years. I have done everything I can to support veterans. I was the chair of the State Fed Relations and Veterans Affairs up in the State House, and I sat on the municipality. This past year, we passed House Bill 1667, which redefined what a veteran is for the state of New Hampshire. It now includes all active duty. It includes National Guard, active and retired. It includes reservists, active and retired. It also includes anybody who attempted basic training but couldn't make it through. All of those people now qualify for this veterans tax credit. And while I agree that this is not, a big chunk, we don't know what this year will bring us. This bill was passed and made effective as of July 26, 2022. We don't know if those numbers will go up by 1. We don't know if those numbers will go up by 2. Double up. So when I look at the information and so on that has been given to us, and I did go to the DRA and I did pull all of the veterans' credits, exemptions, and so on for the entire state of New Hampshire. And I did a quick analysis of it. I can tell you that there are 20 communities that are over 500. And those communities are like Alton, which has 385 veterans, versus our, and I'm only looking at the DRA. The DRA is a year behind. So the DRA says that we give 2,608 of these credits. Alton gives 750, they only have 385. So I look to see who has the most. Dover gives 660 and they have 1,054. So let's look at Manchester. Manchester, who is so much larger than Nashua, okay, we're 92,000, they're 117,000. They give a $500 credit. They only have 2,273 veterans that are getting this credit. Remember, based on the numbers in the DRA, we have 2,608. Concord only gives a $150 credit, and they have 868. So I went through those that were giving, had larger numbers. I looked at Portsmouth. They give 500, but they only have 794. Rochester only gives 300, and they have 1,455. Hudson, 500, and they have 1,086. Merrimack gives a $500 credit, and they have 1,192. Salem, $500 credit, and they have 1,076. I think Mr. Griffin had, or CFO Griffin had mentioned that Nashua is extremely generous. We are. In credits between the, and just to add, we also have 4 veterans that are the special disabled, so they don't pay any tax on theirs. And Manchester doesn't even give that credit. They have 0 on that. So Nashua, for this particular year, gave $1,546,000 in credits to Manchester's, who was the next highest, $1,136,500. And I know that I'm going to be hated for my comments here, but I think we need to let the dust settle. July 22nd was when this legislation was passed. We don't even know who's going to apply, and we're not going to know until I think it's January is when they can first start applying for this next year, if I'm not mistaken. I think we need to let the dust settle, because once we do it, you cannot undo it. And remember, this is for active duty as well. And when you look at HB 1667, the analysis is, this bill clarifies that veterans of the United States Armed Forces who served in any active duty status and who continue to serve qualify for the veterans' property tax credits. Normally, and I have spoken to a few municipalities, including our own, and I asked them, well, what if an active duty veteran says that Nashua, 9 Maywood Drive, say my area, is their home, but they don't live there because they're stationed in Hawaii. Will they still be able to get it? Based on the fact that that is their voting status and so on, yes, they would get it. So I will tell you, I only spoke once on the floor in the House, once, in my 6 years up there. And this was the bill that I spoke against. I stood in the will, and it shook me to my core to speak against HB 1667, but I did it because of how it would affect the municipalities. I want to see every veteran, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, let's see if I can find the definition. I'm not sure I can. Yes, I think I do. Here, it says that a veteran is considered someone who is no longer active. Yet the state of New Hampshire has now redefined veteran as someone who is active. I think that we do have to wait for the dust to settle. I'm not on your committee. I would recommend that maybe we could table this until we get past this, at least this one application, to find out what is going to happen. I don't think it's only going to be the number that was given and then we're only passing on a $26 burden. I think it's going to be much bigger, because we're looking at all reservists that are active duty, National Guards, active servicemen, and those who did not make it through basic training. That could be a really significant number. And considering that Nashua is where the veterans do come, there's a reason for it. We have a lot of programs for veterans. We give incredible credits for veterans. We do more here for veterans than anything else. I don't want to take away from the veterans, but I don't think it's as simple as 250 for just 2,608 veterans. I think that number will increase. So I've said my piece, and trust me, this is painting me down to the inner depths, because to speak out against veterans not getting everything that I truly believe they deserve is killing me. I just don't think it's a simple, small shift. Maybe it is. I hope I'm wrong. But the potential for it is big. And we can thank HB 1667 that became effective on July 26, 2022. And most municipalities don't even know how it's going to be. I did speak to Ms. Zins down in assessing, and she said all of the municipalities are scared of this. So I think we need to really sit back and think, and maybe just table it till we can get more information, or just at least so we can get past this next round. So, my 2 cents.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Shame on Concord. $150, that's awful. You know, I mean, I'm a little concerned about the reclassifications, although, I mean, if somebody just says they live somewhere, they have to own the property, I would assume, right? You don't get a tax exemption if you don't own the property. So just saying you live somewhere is not gonna get you that exemption. You have to prove that you own the place. You know, the last one I'm really concerned about is, you know, if you can't make it through basic training, you become a veteran. I don't think that classification should be part of that, but that's on the state, not on us. You know, we can't control what the classifications of a veteran are. I mean, we all know what it is. I mean, and my dad was a National Guard. He went to Vietnam. I know what a veteran is. It's you know, unfortunate that the state has done that. And but I mean, I'm still going to support this, and I'm still going to support it at this time, unless somebody can convince me otherwise, I guess.
Other committee members, Alderman Lopez.
So in the proposed ordinances, at the bottom, it says, well, it actually makes reference several times, annotated 7228B as it may be amended from time to time. I think we might need to table this, but we could ask legal if we can just amend that to say as it was as of the date of this passage rather than when it was annotated. Instead, use past definitions instead of trying to expand this expansion to everybody that the state of New Hampshire does.
Alderman Clemmons?
Yeah, I think the problem to the previous speaker, I think the problem is the state dictates who gets to, the state dictates what the definition of the person is who qualifies, and the town or city decides whether they're going to opt into that or not. And so the only decision, and to the level and to the degree, you're gonna opt in. So we're, in Nashua currently, we're opted in at $500. The proposal in front of us is to opt in at $750, which is the maximum. I have a question through you, to CFO Griffin. When do we accept these applications?
Madam Chairwoman, subject to my remembrance of assessing days, I think it's in the spring. I think they need to, what I remember is on a rotating basis, they recertify the qualification of that dwelling's residents, and then they accept the applications of new individuals.
But
they have to be ready to be able to process what is referred to as the MS1 in the fall. But there is, I believe there's a subject to check, there's a timing, beginning and an ending, so they're done with the application process.
And if I could continue, so my follow-up question, if we were to delay this until after that period, then this wouldn't take effect until the fiscal, and then let's say we delayed it till after that application process, right? Sometime in May, let's say. And then we adopted this. It would take effect in the fiscal year 2024?
Correct.
I guess my thought on that is I want to help. I understand there's tough economic times right now for people, and there's just no way around that. And I want to help folks. And I get what Alderman Klee is saying about the expansion of it. And I think in some regards, the expansion of it is good. In some regards, no way, right? So I don't have any problem with an active, yes, you're not a veteran, but I don't have any problem with somebody who's actively serving our country getting a property tax credit if they're living here in Nashua. Are they a veteran? No, but you're clearly on your way there. And I don't have a problem. If you dropped out of basic training, on the other hand, well, who am I to judge? But I mean, I guess I don't not want to do this, but I do understand that we should get a handle on what the expansion is and how much that's going to impact the tax rate. Because if we're giving $500 now to a couple of thousand people and that goes up to 4,000 people or whatever it is, then yeah, that's going to have a substantial impact. So my flavor, and I'm not making a motion, but my flavor would be, I'm not ready to vote on this tonight. I think I need some more information. And it's not that I don't support it. I just, I just think we need to know a little bit. I think it's not as clear cut and dry as the elderly one. And I think that's my struggle.
CFO Griffin, I have a question. My understanding is that once the alderman pass something, it's immediately in effect. Is that correct? I know you're not legal counsel, but that is.
Yours, my understanding is it's specifically for next tax year. It's not for this tax year.
Right.
So the assessing team that takes these applications in will know through application, the certification of the veteran status, and then they will apply the $750 to bring down the tax bill through the tax process,
So that's for 2024, correct?
2024.
If we were to get the applications in the spring and then bring back the same piece of legislation, would it still affect the 2024?
Right, the application. So, I mean, what's interesting for purposes of the discussion, somebody sponsored the bill. Somebody has a lot of people interested in that thing being expanded. Because there's a lot of credits, I think I'm eligible for some credits that I don't even use, right? Being over 60. But I mean, you're gonna have a lot of people, like even active, that like, I mean, I get a credit. I mean, there's gonna have to be some marketing. But I'm assuming there was a few legislators that have a bevy of people that wanna get it. But we can wait, I guess, is the point. Not putting this in this year, thank God, because we filed everything. We have the luxury of time on this, and then you can make a decision if you see the numbers. You'll see the impact.
Madam Chairwoman, may I make some clarifications? Yes. First off, to the comment about those that, for lack of a better word, washed out of basic training. The thought process behind it, because I sat through many testimonies, so the thought process behind it was that what if someone started basic training? They had full intent of going through it, but for whatever reason, they broke a leg, they became ill, or it just was more than they could handle. In other words, they couldn't handle going in a submarine, etc. So therefore, the intent was to serve, and they should do it. They don't get an honorable or dishonorable discharge when they get out of that, and almost everything else is that you have to have an honorable discharge. When I spoke to people, there are a lot of people that wash out every single year from every branch of the service. How many of them live in New Hampshire? How many of them live in Nashua? I have no idea. And to answer the question, January 1st is when we start taking applications for the Veterans Credit, and April 15th is the deadline. So to put that into perspective, the testimony that we also heard relative to this particular 1667 was that, we have these veterans that are considering retiring, and why not make them want to retire here in New Hampshire? New Hampshire is one of the most veteran-friendly states in the entire country. That's wonderful. And part of it is because of the no tax status and so on. But again, just putting all this into perspective, it's that the thinking was this would be for people who were considering retiring here, and what better way to make an incentive. So when we said the unintended consequences was, and to Alderman Thibault's comment, is that you would still have to own property here, but unlike now, if you're a veteran, you have to live in that property and you have to be there. But when you're active duty, that's still your home base. That's still your home property, for the record, as far as the government is concerned. But you could be in Germany, you could be in Hawaii, so now you're getting a tax credit for something you might be renting. So that's where the gray area is, and to be honest with you, municipalities still don't understand that enough. They're still waiting to hear from this. So I think so much is in flux. That's why I would ask you to, put a hold on this. And I know it means that maybe they won't get it for 2023. It won't happen until 2024. Even if we waited till April 16th to find out what the numbers are, that's still just 1 year of knowing what this is going to be. I can tell you when we went, the state went from 500 to 750. There were, not just that, there were 3 major changes that happened. One was, we went from what they had as 7228, RSA 7228, which was a veterans tax credit. That veterans tax credit was for those wartime veterans, with the exception of Vietnam veterans, because Uncle Sam came knocking and they had no, so whether they went to Vietnam or not, they didn't have to be in a war zone, they just had to be a Vietnam era veteran. Okay, that was one of the big things. We had that, and then suddenly they created this all veterans tax credit. What that did was that dumped any veteran into this load. And I can tell you, Portsmouth was going up to the max at that time until the state put that through. They put the brakes on and said, wait a minute, I don't think we can afford that. They waited for the dust to settle, and then they brought theirs up to 500 because they had the all other and the veterans tax credit. Then suddenly the state said, no, we're gonna push that max up to 750. They actually tried to even push it up higher. And that, I think 1,500 was one of the ones. And everybody was like, wait a minute here, we already have this all other and we have this veterans. If you're gonna make me do a mandatory of this or that. And that one actually did fail. The one they were trying to push and say everybody had to have a minimum of 500. And I said, look at all these people here are only giving $50, or they were gonna suddenly have to go from 50 to 500. So the state does everything to benefit veterans, and then they put the burden on the municipalities to put it through. And we have time after time, since this summer, I've been hearing people contact me and say, push the veterans credit up, don't you like veterans? I love veterans, I work DOD, I work Department of Veterans Affairs, I was on the committee. Alderman Lopez can tell you, I will work tirelessly for a veteran. I just can't put this burden, unknown burden, onto the remaining of the taxpayers. And again, I would just like you to kind of pause and halt it as far as that's concerned.
Alderman
So thank you.
Clemens. Sorry.
That's okay, no.
Thank you. Knowing that the applications come in January 1st, April 15th, I have a question through you to CFO Griffin. I assume that the application doesn't have a dollar or figure on it, right? It's just whether or not you apply for, you qualify for the credit or not, right?
Correct.
So if we were to wait, if we were to table this until our first personnel meeting in 2023 in April, which would be April 3rd, we could get an idea, right, of how many applications have come through. And then make a decision that evening whether or not, based on how many applications had come in at that point, whether or not we want to do this, whether it makes fiscal sense to do it this year, or, you know, it's going to cause this huge disparity. Maybe there's something maybe we could amend this and increase it by $50 or $100 or something, right? But we'll have an idea of how many of those come in. That puts the schedule for the Board of Aldermen, the second Tuesday of April would be April 11th. So if we get this done on the 3rd, goes to the full board, Alderman on the 11th, and we pass it, that's before the 15th. Theoretically, through you to Mr. Griffin, would that, if we were to pass that, would that be acceptable? And in time to?
Yeah, that would be acceptable, because that's how it works now.
Okay.
So the assessing team works with the people applying, they get credit, they get certified, they get the counts. Then they put the counts on the MS1 in October.
Okay.
And that creates the tax rate, so you have time to come in. And I'm not sure if they're recertifying, that would be a question for the assessing team, but you do have time. And it'll be no effect this year, it's gonna be next November's bill.
So if I could continue, I would recommend we do that, because I think it addresses the concerns that Alderman Klee has brought up, gives us time to see how many of those applications are gonna come in. I mean, the last 15 days, I don't know, maybe there is a statistical rush, but we could kind of figure that out based on, we could scale that, right? And no. So I think that's really this committee, in my opinion, that's our best foot forward. And I don't know what other committee members think, but I think that's the best way forward.
Alden Camo's been waiting. I'm gonna let him go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to clear up two things. HB 1667 says not less than 90 days of service time. And when I went through basic training, it was 13 weeks, which is 91 days. So you can't really wash out on day one and still qualify. And having actually gone through basic training, I can tell you that I do know people that suffered permanent disability during training. So it's certainly possible, and I wouldn't want to exclude those people if possible. And then I had a question about parliamentary inquiry. We're going to be coming up on my first end of the year. If we lay this on the table, doesn't it go away at the end of the year? Doesn't it have to be resubmitted in the new legislative year?
Alderman Close?
To answer that last question, no, because the term is for the 2-year term. So next January, that'll happen.
Thank you.
Yep.
Alderman Lopez?
So I'm in agreement with Alderman Clemens' plan, but I would suggest to CFO Griffin that we also track them coming in real time, at least internally, because that'll be putting us into the beginning of budget season. So if we do start to see a sudden change in tax revenue coming in, we're going to want to adjust that. Otherwise, every veteran in the city will be happy except the one chairing the budget committee.
Alderman Tebow?
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm good.
Is there a motion? Alderman
I
Close?
motion to table until the personnel meeting in April.
You've heard the motion, it's not debatable. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That is, I don't believe we're taking the thing off the table.
We're not? Okay.
I don't know. I wasn't informed of that. So tabled in committee, that is staying on the table as far as I have heard. There's no public here. Anyone for general discussion? Any remarks by Alderman? Alderman Tebow?
Just to be real quick, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Someone commented once that we take our public comment and we're not, very fun. So I'm going to say something fun, I guess. I just want to congratulate Alderman Lopez for coming in second to Team Tebow at Liquid Therapy's trivia night last Thursday. And beating Team Lopez is not easy, as they're always one of the best teams. But, it happens once in a while. So I know Alderman Lopez will probably want to speak on that, but thank you.
Alderman Lopez?
As Alderman Tebow is well aware, Team Lopez lost because Mr. Lopez came in after a question that he knew had just been answered erroneously, so you were lucky.
I want to quickly make a remark. I think that this was great discussion this evening. I didn't get to speak on it because it got moved, but I think that the veterans tax credit makes a lot of sense, and I actually think that expanding it to people who are currently serving makes sense as well. I think we just need to wrap our arms around what that's going to look like before we put that tax burden on. So I'm grateful for the committee for hearing all of the discussion and knowing that we have some time and taking the time to do our due diligence on this. I don't have any more aldermanic meetings this week, so I wanted to remind everybody that Tuesday, November 8th is Election Day. And that you should get out and vote. It is a critical part of our democracy, and I hope you will all come out and vote in this election. Alderman Clee.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. I just want to make a couple comments. One is, I agree with you, the veterans credit is very important, and I do appreciate this committee taking the time to do its due diligence, and I'm not sure that a year would be enough, but every amount of time, and I think working is very important. The other thing is I wanted to talk about something very serious, the shooting that was over by the Layton House over the weekend. Just to put everybody's mind at ease, the public is not in danger. It was I hate to say a one-off, but it was an altercation between a couple of individuals. There has been an arrest, and our police department were on it. The Telegraph did put out an article later that same day. It happened at 1 o'clock in the morning, but I do want everybody to know that the public is not in danger. And to the 200-plus children that came to my house yesterday, thank you very much. I had the most adorable little girl who went around hugging all of the animatronics. She gave Oogie Boogie great big hugs and then had to go to every single element and say goodbye to every one of them. I just thought it was adorable. So thank you very much.
Who says we don't have fun in our remarks? Do I have a motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion is to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Yay.
The Personnel Committee meeting is adjourned at 10:54. Thank you for your attention.
It's supposed to sound like a dolphin.